home training. Wanna be me so bad, but they failing. Step to the plate though, I'll take a challenger. I ain't scared of no low life scavenger. I should warn you though, if you haven't heard, I ain't no Colleen, ukulele ballager. Shots been fired, wanna tell that, say it to my face though. Now behind my back, won't be long till you share it in the group chat. And when I call you up, you're gonna backtrack. And you should've kept my name out your mouth. That's though how it all turned out. When you try to use my name for clout, keep on going, give you something you can talk about.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing this fine? Tuesday, January 20th. We are just a few moments before the Timothy Busfield detention hearing. Before we make it even one step further, please do double check that you are subscribed. I think some people have been being unsubscribed lately, so just make sure you didn't get unsubscribed. Oopsie. And then we can move right along. So today, like I said, is Timothy Busfield's detention hearing. I thought we could start with the video stream by reading just a little article here about it. I'm going to go on the reader view here. Okay, so this is the Tri-State homepage. Timothy Busfield to appear in New Mexico court for detention hearing. Albuquerque actor-director Timothy Busfield is set to face a judge Tuesday at 2 p.m. So that's the mountain time, which is 2 hours before my time zone right now. It is 3:50 where I am. So it's 1:50 p.m. mountain time at this current moment of this live stream. So we do have 10 minutes until the hearing starts. Now, what I do want to let y'all know is there was some footage from inside the courtroom from the arraignment. Okay. But I looked just now. We'll look again together. It doesn't appear as though this is like a live streamed type of thing, although it may be. But whenever I was just now looking, I was looking for the last, hour or so. I did not see anyone even purporting to be live broadcasting the hearing. But I hope that we're going to get some live tweets or something like that. We're gonna be booping and bopping around, as it were, to try and see what information we can gather. Now, if we're unable to get inside the courtroom, I do have several filings that we can read together and go over, and that will show, what types of things are being argued about and things like that. Now, and Timothy Busfield's wife, Laura Ingalls from the Little House on the Prairie, yes, she was a former child actor herself. And she has been making a little bit of waves in the media. She's been writing to the judge, and it was reported today that this lady, Melissa Gilbert, she is going to be expected to be one of 12 or like almost a dozen. So I don't know, almost a dozen means like, 10 or 11 as far as what I'm concerned. But she is one of the supposed witnesses that is supposedly going to be called today at the detention hearing. Not only is one witness getting called, but apparently close to a dozen witnesses. This follows news reports that Timothy Busfield had, over 60 or over 70 people submit letters on his behalf, attesting to his character. So today's hearing doesn't have to do with anything about guilt or innocence. Today's hearing it's a detention hearing. The government, the Albuquerque state, the state of New Mexico, through the Albuquerque Department of the District Attorney's Office, has asked the court to keep Timothy Busfield in jail pending his trial. Now, Timothy said he don't want to be in jail. His wife has written the court, said he doesn't need to be in jail. She needs him. This person needs him. Her delinquent son needs him and all this stuff. So today's hearing is all just about whether or not Timothy is going. Oh my gosh, is Rabbit in here? Oh my God, please. Shout out to Rabbit in the chat. Is she really in here? I know she's live right now too. But yes, shout out to Rabbit. She's also live here today too. It does make me also, Sarah, think about the Drake Bell situation where he, regardless what you think about him as an adult, there was a time before he was an adult when he was just a kid. And I'm just talking about that, time period and that person. But I think he was maybe 15 years old, and there was like 75 people, 50 people or something that had written letters in support of his supposed, abuser. Um, yeah, it also reminds Alexis, excuse me, of the Danny Masterson case. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't follow that case closely. Um, wouldn't that be biased because they're married? Yeah, but as long as a bias is disclosed, biased people are allowed to speak. Like families of victims can speak in a lot of these sentencings and things like that. So, yeah, bias, but that doesn't mean that it's not allowed in court. At this stage, remember, because this isn't the stage again where they're doing guilt or innocence. This isn't going to be putting on evidence for the purpose of the trial. Strictly speaking, it's putting on evidence for the purposes of whether or not he should be allowed to get out on bail or not. Now, the government has filed. Um, she's not in the chat. Yeah, well, I wouldn't expect her to be because she is live right now, I think. And she yeah, they can't well, they can. You can testify against your husband, but you don't have to. You can't be compelled to testify against your spouse. Somebody said I rebuke those letters. And look, listen, if Timothy Busfield is really truly innocent, which I don't know, he could be because I wasn't there. We're going to have to see the evidence as it plays out. I am very sympathetic to people, like not spending unnecessary, unwarranted time in jail. Okay, that's ridiculous to be able to hold somebody who's innocent in jail. I do see that side of things. That being said, there are certainly cases where there is probable cause to lock this person up. Maybe they're a flight risk. Maybe they indicated that they were something like that. And that's why each and every case gets its own detention hearing. What I will say is the government has filed what it purports to be evidence that Timothy Busfield should not be walking free amongst the land of the living. And they, like I said, they submitted that in a filing, and we can read that together. We already did read it together, so I'm probably not going to go through line by line or anything like that, but I'll pull it back up and show y'all. In the meantime, let's finish this article. He's facing charges. He's accused of inappropriate actions on a movie, or excuse me, on a TV show set. He also was an actor. He turned himself in a video he shared with TMZ before his arrest. He called the allegations false. He is saying that he did not do this stuff. He was held without bond at his first court appearance last week. At his hearing today, prosecutors are going to seek to convince a judge to keep Timothy Busfield behind bars until the trial. Pointing to a pattern of SUL misconduct allegations going all the way back to the 1990s, none of those prior cases ever led to criminal charges. Yesterday, Busfield's defense team submitted 2 brief audio recordings of initial police interviews in which the children say that Busfield did not inappropriately, them. Prosecutors claim, though, that those recordings don't exonerate Timothy. They suggest that maybe the boys simply didn't disclose the abuse at the time. But this, like I said, and I did prepare y'all, I did warn you, and I did prepare you, this is one of the things that Timothy Busfield's defense is going to use, and frankly, is going to have to use. That the stories from the boys, the accusers, have changed. The very first time they sat down and spoke with, I think it was doctors or maybe it was investigators of some sort, the boys not only didn't say that Timothy Busfield had touched them inappropriately, what they actually said affirmatively was that he did not. They said he did not touch them inappropriately. Now that, put together with the fact that Timothy Busfield does seem to be very media savvy. He seems to be wanting to try this in the court of public opinion, which is his right. I guess if there's going to be stories run, I guess he should be allowed to get his stuff out there. But there's already been a little bit of speculation on the part of the media, different people speaking and talking about the case, that Timothy Busfield is going to be making a major push, even in today's detention hearing, to play this out in court, to affect our opinion, the court of public opinion, meaning our opinion. Oh my God. Alexis said, I just got an ad for Abercrombie. Jump scare. Well, shout out. I hope they pay good because I'll take their money. I mean, honestly, like, I don't mind. I like Abercrombie clothes. I I do have a few items, but from what I understand, that former CEO hasn't been the CEO for many, many years. Okay, on Monday, Busfield's defense submitted the audio recordings of those brief audio recordings, basically little snippets of initial police interviews with the kids. Prosecutors, though, are saying, yeah, that doesn't mean he's innocent. That doesn't mean he's completely exonerated. Like, sure, maybe that does something to our evidence. Maybe we do have to get to the bottom of why their story has changed, but that's what a trial is for, and this man is dangerous. That is what the prosecutors are alleging. In a previous criminal complaint, an investigator with the police department said one of the children had reported that Busfield touched him on an inappropriate area when he was 7, another time when he was 8. The boy's twin brother told authorities that he was also touched inappropriately, but he didn't specify where. He just said he didn't say anything because he didn't want to get in trouble. One of the boys had disclosed during a therapy session that he was inappropriately touched. According to the complaint, those records were obtained by police during the investigation, the therapy records. Busfield's wife, actor or actress, Melissa Gilbert, could speak Tuesday, that's today, at her husband's detention hearing. She played Laura Ingalls in the 70s and 80s TV series Little House on the Prairie, and she is on the list of potential witnesses submitted. Now, some of these documents that they're alluding to, I have not been able to get my hands on. Like, for example, I have not been able to get my hands on this witness list that they're expecting to call today. Let me show y'all the case itself. So I have some new information. Clip this, breaking news. There are now 2 separate cases which are showing up for the search of Timothy Busfield's name. So I did want to show y'all this. This is a public record. So this one right here, T-4-FR 2026-000273, Timothy Busfield, date of birth 1957, defendant, state of New Mexico versus Timothy Busfield. And the judge in this one is judge, honorable, whatever, I don't know, honorable or dishonorable, we don't know yet. Judges can go both ways these days. Shanetta R. Estrada. This is the filing date of the 9th. Now, January 9th is when the arrest warrant was issued, and of course they did not get hands on Timothy Busfield for several days after that. But look, there's another case that now shows up when you type his name in, and I believe that this is the case for the detention hearing specifically. This is the case that got transferred to district court because it has to do with detention, and the name of the judge is Brett R. Loveless. Okay, I do not want my judge to have the last name Loveless. All right, that is scary, but I'm just going to click on that one. Well, I guess I'll click on the first one first, the top one first. And this is his charges. And as you can see, the most recent event in the event description is from the 14th. Today is the 20th. So this is from 6 days ago, almost a week ago, transferred to district court for the pretrial detention motion. Okay, so if we go all the way back, it's not a very long list of events, but if we go all the way back to January 9th, criminal complaint, that's when it was filed and the warrant did issue. Warrant was issued on the 9th, like I said, remaining defendant pending first appearance. Okay, so then the warrant was served on the 13th, offender booking sheet, public safety assessment. And then on the 14th, the government filed a motion for pre-trial detention. That happened on the 14th. That same very day, the judge said, okay, Judge Shanetta Estrada said, okay, bet. We're going to then transfer this case for the pretrial purposes of the pretrial detention. That's what I think happened. That's what it looks like to me. So then we're going to go to that next case over here. It's really not a next case. Again, this is just for the purpose, I believe, of the hearing for the detention, which is happening today, right now. As of 3 minutes ago, it supposedly had started. So this case number is D-202-P as in Paul, D as in dog, -2026-00051. Okay, so this one has several events as well. Petition for pretrial detention. Then Tim got a lawyer. Christopher A. Dodd. Okay, he enters. Then the detention hearing was set for today at 2 p.m. in person, courtroom 602. There's a discovery order. We can take a look at that. I do have the petition for the pretrial detention. We will look at that together. I think I also have the discovery order. We'll take a look at that if so. Another lawyer enters into the docket, entry of appearance. I guess she's going to be the one that's going to be arguing today about the detention. Now, there's going to be a couple things that the judge is going to be looking for, and a few things that are going to need to be argued about today. On the high level and the surface level, the obvious thing is he going to walk free or is he going to be detained? Is he going to be able to be living out among the land of the living while he's awaiting trial, or is he going to be stuck in jail? Now, I will tell y'all my prediction off the bat is stuck in jail. That being said, don't take my prediction as too, don't give it too much weight, because first of all, this is New Mexico. I'm not, to my knowledge, I don't want to misspeak, but to my memory, to my knowledge right now, I don't remember ever covering any New Mexico cases. So I really don't know how these New Mexico cases work. I don't know how the courts are. And also, this is a state level case, not a federal case. But if this were a federal case, which I do have only slightly more experience following as a member of the public, then usually if something has to do with children, there is what is called a presumption of detention. That means that it's a type of case where a preliminary hearing or a probable cause affidavit or some type of probable cause has been found enough to detain this person in the first place. And if it has to do with children, they're very serious about keeping people locked up. Now, we can, of course, reasonable minds can disagree over whether that's fair, whether that's constitutional and all that, but that is just kind of like how it is right now. So I did want to just describe that. But nevertheless, he is still going to have to prove a few things if he wants to walk free among the land of the living. And like one of the questions that the judge is going to have to get an answer from the two parties and try to figure out what's the truth is, number one, does Timothy Busfield pose a threat to the community or to anybody in particular, to victims, to witnesses? Does he pose a threat to the trial, a fair trial? Does he pose a threat to obstruction of justice, things like that? Another question is going to be, does he demonstrate the ability to follow and respect court orders? Now, the prosecutors are going to argue, no, he doesn't. He knew that there was a warrant out for his arrest, and he went gallivanting all over the country. He did a lie detector test in the meantime. He did a video and gave it to TMZ. He doesn't have the ability to follow orders. But Timothy Busfield's side is going to say, yes, he does, because he turned himself in. Nobody had to come and bust down his door. They did do that, but they didn't need to, because it was 1 hour before he turned himself in. And his lawyer would argue and have argued, has the right to defend himself if they're going to be running stories, and he has the right to speak too. He was in the process of turning himself in, and he turned himself in a reasonable time frame and at a reasonable time and in a reasonable manner. So these are going to be the two different sides that are going to be argued, okay, just specifically with respect to this detention hearing. So, as I was showing y'all and pointing out, there was also other stuff that was filed, entry of appearance. This prosecutor, Savannah Brandenburg Koch, enters for the state. Notice of redaction of personal identifying information. And then there was an order, a standing decorum order. Now, this was days ago, the last document that is publicly shown as being filed. But we do know that there was a submission at least last night. So some of this stuff must be being submitted off the public record, at least for now. And they don't, like, as you can see here, they don't really make the documents available like to purchase or anything right here. But I was able to find a few. There's different sources that have been able to get these and procure these, I think, pursuant to FOIA type requests. So I want to go over some of those. And there was a standing decorum order. Oh, I want to go over some of those. So, and there was this standing decorum order. Now, as you can see here, the hearing date is today, the detention hearing before Judge David Murphy. This is going to be in the Albuquerque District Court, courtroom 620. Since this is a district court, let me just see if maybe Pacer has something on it. I'll just take a look quickly. It would be nice if we could get some of these documents. Okay, so I'm going to run a search for Timothy. No. Busfield, Busfield. No, nothing here for that. Okay. So let me just do like a quick search of just like the news right now. I do have many things to go over with y'all today. So even if this isn't live, like live, I do have stuff to update you with. What is this? It says Timothy Busfield in court for pretrial detention hearing. So this does say live. Okay, so this is Fox News. I'll take a look on some other ones while this ad plays. I'll see if there's like a YouTube channel streaming it. Okay, hold on. Oh, maybe. Wait, maybe it is live. Wait a second. I'm going to get my speaker fixed. Hold on.
Prior to the hearing, I received the state's 6 exhibits and the defendant's A through BB. 28 exhibits.
Something like that, Your Honor.
The court is going to enter in the background history report and the public safety assessment as court's exhibits 1 and 2, but I think those are already reflected in what you guys have submitted. So those all being admitted, each side will have 1 hour for its presentation. And we'll start with the state, Ms. Brandon Burko.
Is it okay if I come up to the podium?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. The state is requesting that this court find the defendant dangerous and that there are no conditions of release that this court can impose to secure the safety of this community. As the court noted, I did send exhibits, and defense has a copy of those as well. The state's exhibits are focused on what Rule 5409 actually requires. Pretrial detention is not a credibility trial. It's not a civil damages dispute, nor is it the studio's internal investigation, which is at best minimal and insufficient. It's whether the defendant is dangerous and if the court can impose conditions to secure the safety of the community. Thank you. And that's what the state will be focusing on. As I go through the state's exhibits, I will address some of the defendant's exhibits as well. I know the court gave the state an hour, so I would like to reserve some time for rebuttal as well. So the state's first exhibit is just the printout of Odyssey of the defendant's history here in New Mexico, which the state shows that there is none besides the underlying charges here. State's exhibit 2 is the register of actions from the underlying case that we're here on, and just an event of showing when the criminal complaint was filed and the arrest warrant and when that warrant was served, along with the criminal complaint, which I will mostly focus on today. So I want to give some context, as there's a lot of defense exhibits along with the arrest warrant that is pretty lengthy. The named victims in this case, they started working on the show, The Cleaning Lady, in 2021. They filmed the pilot. They were asked later to come back for seasons 1 through 3. And that lasted until spring of 24. SL did the primary acting for seasons 1 and 2, although VL acted as well. And VL did the primary acting in season 3. Before season 4, there was a lot of back and forth with the children if they were going to continue to be casted in their role. After the 3 seasons, the boys were asked to audition, which is something they didn't have to do through seasons 1, 2, and 3. They had that audition here in Albuquerque in September of 2024. The lead actress in this show, her name is Elodie Young, and she was very close with the family. They went on vacations. However, she has not been compliant with this investigation.
Interesting.
At that time of the audition, Miss Young asked the mother of the parents to come to that audition and leave her husband at home. They arrived. VL was taken in a back room to do this audition. And then they left after the audition. Later, they found out that VL or SL was not going to be casted for the role that they've been in for the first 3 seasons.
Interesting.
And only VL auditioned that day. Which, after they were released, the parents, I believe, posted that they were thankful for their opportunities, was very thankful for the show. Even though at that time the show was still using the boys, the victims in this case, to promote season 4. So eventually this brings us to the start of the investigation, which is the state's 2. There was concerns about abuse because the parents were being tagged in social media posts about the defendant's history. Because of those concerns, they asked their boys if there was any, with anyone, not just Mr. Busfield, but with anybody, if they were having any issues or inappropriate touching, anything like that. Or if they, actually, I think it was very clear that it was if they were uncomfortable in any situation. When the boy said, "Do you mean like with Uncle Tim?" Later, in November of 2024, the children were seen at UNMH. In UNMH, the doctor there is the one that referred this case, called the police and reported it, which as a mandated reporter needed to. So based off of the doctor seeing the children and speaking with the parents and getting a medical history, they had concerns about grooming and the sexual abuse, and they reported it to law enforcement. APD later, I believe the same day, were dispatched to the parents' homes. They talked to the parents and they talked to the boys. The boys did not disclose any sexual abuse, but did disclose signs of grooming and did disclose that the defendant had touched them. Because there was no disclosure of sexual abuse, APD essentially closed the case. CACU said they weren't able to take the case. During this time, after the doctor visit, I believe in November 2024, the kids then started therapy. I do want to note that in child abuse cases, I know the court is aware of this, is very typical that, well, one, officers are not supposed to speak with children, right? Because of the power dynamic. And they want to make sure they're getting a reliable disclosure. So it's not uncommon that the kids did not disclose at that time or were ready to disclose at that time to a police officer that showed up at their house. Also, it's not best practices when interviewing a child according to our MDD structure by statute in New Mexico and across the country. Later, in February of 25, February 17th and 18th, there was a referral made to the SAG hotline about the boy that took over the role that the twins played.
Okay.
And that referral essentially said that a person saw the defendant kiss the boy while he was getting a haircut, that the defendant was intoxicated, and he had been drinking in his trailer as well. The next day, there was another referral made to the SAG hotline about how the defendant was alone with VL during this audition back in September. It's my understanding that the parents of the victims in this case did not make any of those referrals. Because of the liability and now these referrals, Warner Brothers did their own investigation and hired, and I believe outside counsel, Ms. Govern, to conduct this investigation. I know that is part of defense's exhibits. However, if you actually read those, the first one that was done in February, I believe it concluded in March, beginning of March.
I did read them.
Thank you.
Long
They
weekends.
didn't interview any of the necessary witnesses to what was actually reported, which I think shows you the reliability of the investigation as well. After that investigation was concluded and there was a report, it's my understanding that Warner Brothers or this outside counsel was calling the parents of the twin boys.
Wow.
They went to talk to a civil attorney on how to address any communications, and I believe their attorney sent some concerns or a letter, I'm not too sure exactly, but sent some information about the boys. That's the second report that, as you see, is not done until September of 2025. In that report, there are concerns of sexual abuse, and nobody, the independent attorney nor Warner Brothers, ever just reported this abuse. As we know in New Mexico, it's mandated that everybody, not just teachers, doctors, are mandated reporters, but everybody is. And so it is concerning that an investigator who is still investigating, even though they didn't talk to the kids or anyone relevant to that information, they still didn't report any abuse despite this letter. And they found, in both findings, they found that there was no wrongdoing, essentially, even though their investigation was pretty minimal and the witnesses needed weren't ever interviewed. Which now brings us, because that report was done in September of 2025, which now brings us to how the boys then disclosed the sexual abuse against the defendant. It was during therapy, not the parents, to a neutral party that SL described sexual abuse by the defendant, and VL disclosed inappropriate touching. SL even disclosed in therapy that he was mad at his dad because he thought he knew that it was going on because he had the iPad or these links to watch his children. The therapist then made a referral. I believe that then a doctor saw the kids at Journey Pediatrics. Also, the therapist throughout their time had diagnosed one of the boys, SL, with PTSD because of these issues. In September, SL was seen by a doctor at Journey Pediatrics who also reported or indicated sexual abuse in that visit and treatment of the children. I also want to make something clear that the doctor at Journey Pediatrics in September of 2025 was the one who reported the concerns to CYFD. The mother did not call CYFD. It was the doctor. I know that the court is aware of this. However, it is the norm in child sexual abuse cases that kids delay disclose, and for many reasons that are also present here in this case. About 80% of children delay disclose. That's not only known nationally and supported by literature, but also in my experience prosecuting these cases. So it is not abnormal, but the norm on how the kids reported. It's also very normal that kids give a little bit at a time to test the waters to see what happens. As reported in their forensic interview, they talked about being scared. They talked about people being mean to them. And so that also shows why a delayed disclosure is typically made and supported by the literature. In October of 2025, October 31st of 2025, after this investigation started again with the detective on this case, during those safe house interviews, again, to a neutral third party, the boys disclosed the abuse. I also want to make this clear that the boys never said that the abuse happened when they were alone with the defendant. They actually indicated that some people were around and some people would leave. They never said that this happened when they were alone with him. So these arguments coming from defense and the exhibits provided don't add up with the testimony and with the kids' disclosures that they have given.
Okay.
The boys also disclosed how it made them feel and how uncomfortable they were. What's also noticeable is that when SL discloses the timeline of abuse, it matches up with the other witnesses, including his set teacher, the person that supervised him while on set, changed, that his behavior changed, that he didn't want to act anymore. He didn't want to be around anymore. So this isn't just coming from the child, but this is also coming from witnesses. His behavior corroborates what he is saying as well. What is also important and throughout this investigation is what the defendant told police. He stated that he would tickle and pick up the boys, even though he knew that with Warner Brothers, they weren't allowed to be alone or touching. But then later, he contradicts himself and says that he doesn't really even remember the boys. After he's already said he did tickle the boys, and it's highly likely that he did touch them. Not sexually, but touch them by tickling them in all of the other grooming aspects that the kids disclose. So his own statement contradicts the letters really provided on defense's behalf. Something notable also is the defendant says that the victim's father very much encouraged the behavior to hug Mr. Busfield, and he felt uncomfortable, but he never told the dad to stop, that it's not, that we don't hug children, that we don't touch children. He never told that. He never said that. As you see in State's Exhibit 2, several witnesses were also interviewed. Lauren Trujillo and Taylor Trujillo, that also discussed that the kids weren't always supervised. And even the set teacher, Lee Lewin, she also said that she was in the main room where there wasn't cameras, but that she confirmed the iPads and confirmed there was a lot of people around, but that people lose track. There's a lot going on in these sets. I want to mention Danielle Vigil and Christina Carr because now it seems like they're unhappy after they already gave a statement to police on how it was portrayed. The court knows that not everything in every interview is word for word in documentation. What is relevant to the allegations
Do y'all see him?
is usually in a criminal complaint arrest warrant. Especially this warrant was already quite lengthy. However, there is concerns that people have now got to those witnesses since speaking with police. And now they're writing affidavits on behalf of the defendant, suggesting that what they said wasn't true.
Oh, shoot.
So as for the dangerousness prong, State's Exhibit 2 shows that. Criminal sexual contact of a minor is a mandatory serious violent offense, which is different from necessarily dangerous. And here might not seem violent in the literal sense, but any deal of harm done to a child, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, the deal of physical harm, the emotional harm is long lasting. And that behavior when grooming children, engaging in grooming and engaging in sexual abuse is inherently dangerous. The state does have other arguments to make on dangerousness when it comes to the defendant's history. And I want to make clear that nowhere in the case law and nowhere in 5409 or the F6 factors say that the defendant's history has to be charged criminal conduct. In fact, it can be unknown conduct at the time and what's presented to the court, which is laid out also in State's Exhibit 2 about prior allegations, and in State's Exhibit 3, 4, 5, and 6 of other victims and the victims that we already knew have reported previously have come forward and gave a statement as well. So the first allegation, a 17-year-old disclosed that the defendant had sexually assaulted her, tried to serve her alcohol, and groped her. Unfortunately, at that time, what she reported is that the cops said that he wasn't going to be there much longer, and there was nothing that they could do. And there was later a civil suit filed in which the defendant later settled. That was back in 1994, and that victim was 17 years old at the time. Something I want to know about the kids' disclosures and all of the disclosures that were made prior and have been made since, there's a pattern. The pattern is all touching. There's a pattern of his conduct. Also, the boys' disclosures in this case, they were detailed, they were visceral, they were also not exaggerated, which I think cuts into defense's argument about what they think this case is. I say that because I think it is important when we're filing PDMs on these types of cases. If defense wants this court to believe that this is all about money,
Ooh.
wouldn't it be easier for a child and all of these previous victims to disclose more than criminal sexual contact? It's shocking that all of the victims that have reported all report a similar pattern from the defendant, and they're not exaggerated, which makes the evidence in their disclosures credible. The second allegation occurred in March of 2012. It's my understanding that, and I believe this victim has called law enforcement as well, but essentially he had
Is this one of your exhibits?
Yes, it's in stage 2.
Oh, okay. Stage two.
Yeah. The last page of the arrest warrant, Your Honor. Or the second to last page. In March of 2012, a 28-year-old accused Busfield of touching her inappropriately in a movie theater. She reported to police, and the prosecutors felt like there was not enough evidence to move forward, and he said it was consensual. Again, that pattern of touching, of criminal sexual contact is important for the pattern of the defendant, especially when it comes to the F6 factors, which I will get to. With the reports, even from the two victims I just spoke about, also shows that the defendant is dangerous. Along with State's Exhibit 3, 4, 5, and 6. Rachel Wright was that victim, the 17-year-old victim. That's what State's Exhibit 3 is. I think what's also notable is that she felt, and you can see this on the second page of State's Exhibit 3, is that she felt like he was manipulating her throughout the process as well. State's Exhibit 4, these victims reported soon after, but this had happened a long time ago. The victim in this case, and I believe this has been reported to APD, but I think has been reported to Sacramento PD as well. That victim was 16 years old at the time. She was working at Beach Street Theater, a theater in Sacramento that the defendant and his brother started. I believe she was interning or working there, and the defendant again touched her, kissed her, and then stuck his hands down her pants, touching her genitals. Their report is that the defendant's brother and the defendant came to talk to the victim and the victim's dad to not report it, and that like he would get therapy, which the family agreed with, and nothing went further in that case. State's Exhibit 5 is from the defendant and his wife's personal assistant. They worked, I believe, through the May of 2017 until 2019. And she mostly describes how the defendant was inappropriate, intimidating, that there was a lot of, this position of authority that we've kind of seen play out in this case and all of the other victims that have come forward, and had made comments to her about the way she acted and that he might have a crush on her if she continues that behavior. So there was concerns of inappropriate conduct with her as well. State 6, Claudia Christian, who is an actress. She has reported that when they were filming The Strays, the defendant and her, she was already casted as an actress. And during the show, they were running lines, which was common, and they went to his trailer. She stated that once she got there, he was alone, and almost immediately after she entered his trailer, he forcibly grabbed her and threw her against the wall, and started kissing her, and he had an erection. And she ended up running out and telling the, I believe, assistant director to keep her away from Mr. Busfield. Which those allegations also go to the defendant's dangerousness. So I think by clear and convincing evidence, the state has met the dangerousness prong here in this case. Not only because that people are coming forward and reporting this, but the way they're reporting how the pattern is consistent and the power that the defendant has had over all of these victims and the position that he's played that role in. When it comes to conditions of release, the court focuses on the F6 factors. The first factor, the nature and circumstances of the offense charged, and whether that offense is a crime of violence, which the state has gone through and argues that we have met that, the nature and circumstances of the offense charged, and that this is a crime of violence. The weight of evidence against defense. It's still the state's position that the evidence is strong. The boys' allegations are supported by medical findings and by their therapist. And again, their accounts were specific and not exaggerated. I want to touch on this a little bit more due to defense's filings. Defense first couple exhibits are about the victim's parents and their criminal history, essentially saying they have a motive to lie because they have a past, because they have had a conviction and had some other lawsuits. The parents aren't the victims in this case. The parents are not the ones making these allegations. The kids didn't even disclose to their parents. They disclosed to a neutral third party, two of them, their therapist and a doctor. To believe, well, first, during criminal proceedings, there is no money attached.
Right.
They don't get money at the end of this process. For a victim to go through this is not an easy process at all.
No.
Defense makes allegations about how much the kids were acting, which is, they're quite a bit off, but yes, they were making money for working. And what makes more sense is because they weren't with Mr. Busfield anymore, is to continue to get acting jobs if they were about money. Not to come through the criminal justice system, because it's not guaranteed. Neither is a civil case, and there's no civil case that has been filed by the parents at this time. I think that argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense when looking at the facts
I agree.
and what we're here on today. We're here about what the kids are disclosing, what the crime charged is, and if there's conditions that the court can set.
Yep.
Not about the parent's history. And essentially what they're saying is that anybody that has a criminal history can never be a victim because they're going to lie.
Wow, get them.
But this isn't about the parent's history. This is about the defendant and the defendant's history and why he won't comply with conditions of release.
So I do have a question.
Yes.
With regards to the parents, there's reference to the parents having an attorney, and the attorney gave them the advice to seek out medical intervention in this case. Has there been a lawsuit filed, or is there plans to file a companion civil lawsuit?
It's my understanding that they are not filing a civil lawsuit. The attorney they talked to about what to do was a friend of the families. I believe one of their employers, actually. What do we do in this circumstance? It was more as friendly advice, not let's start this civil lawsuit and then.
That part wasn't clear.
Yes.
That it was.
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to make that clear. And there is no civil lawsuit filed. Sorry, Judge, I'm just getting back to my notes. I think what is also important when it comes to the weight of evidence against the defendant
Look at him.
is that we have corroborating evidence that the defendant, once the defendant started directing SL, that's when he didn't want to act anymore or be on set. That there's been bedwetting nightmares, that other witnesses have also seen a big shift despite defendants' affidavits. There are still witnesses that say, no, these kids, SL particularly, had a change in behavior after Mr. Busfield started directing him. I know I stated this, but I do want to make this clear because so many of the affidavits and so many of the letters of support say this could not happen because there were so many people around. The kids didn't say it happened when they were alone. And we see every day that sexual abuse with children can happen in front of several people. We know that from well-known cases. We know that from the Larry Nassar case, where he was physically and sexually abusing his patients in front of their parents.
Wow.
We know that these events and these crimes can happen in front of other people and them not recognize or see what is going on. The history and characteristic of the defendant, like I said, there's nowhere in the rule that says there has to be known criminal.
With this LG OLED from Best Buy.
What the hell was that? They playing ads. What was that? They playing ads and it was loud. Okay. Once this ad's over, I'll turn her back on.
Of the defendant, the state would argue possesses a high risk, a very high risk of offense. Because either people are going to continue to ignore it and they're going to continue to believe that the defendant could never do anything.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
And that he would never do something like this, which I'll get to his letters in a moment.
Woo!
I think what's also important to note is the defendant's testing that he did, this ABLE testing. When it really comes to risk assessment of offenders, which that testing really has nothing to do with risk assessment, which would be more appropriate for this hearing when the court's considering conditions of release, really has to do with if he's at risk. He's already been named in the lawsuit early on, back in the 90s, and the behavior hasn't stopped. In fact, it's continued, as we see in these reports and other allegations, and he's continued to get away with them. And so the ongoing risk of the defendant reoffending or continuing to do what he has because of the power of his position shows this court that he does have the likelihood that he could reoffend. The nature and seriousness of the danger to any person or the community that would be posed by the defendant's release. Pursuant to State versus Begay, I have the case if the court wants it. I'm sure the court is familiar with it. The court must determine if the risk of releasing the defendant is one the court is willing to take in light of everything presented. This comes down to a simple question. Is the court confident it can set any conditions of release that, if violated, will be reported or can be monitored? And the answer here is no. When it comes to this type of case, these types of charges, child sexual abuse, there's no way the court can set conditions to make sure the defendant won't be around children, won't continue to engage in this behavior, continue to have witnesses provide new affidavits in lieu of what they've already told police. and a lot of other concerns, even a flight risk as well, and his compliance. I want to note the defendant's 87 letters of support.
Wow.
I think this is important when the court is considering conditions of release. Because how is a court knowing that there's, at the very least, 87 people supporting the defendant, and in these letters, all saying, I knew he would never do this. He could never do this, and he would comply with conditions. And I would allow my own children to be with him.
Wow.
How can the court set conditions knowing that all of these people blindly trust the defendant's word and not knowing any of the evidence that he's actually going to comply? It's only because of their relationship. And that's the concern here in child sexual abuse cases. We do have a great pretrial service division here in this courthouse, but they can't monitor these charges, the concerns for this court, the concerns that 87 people already have made their minds up that the defendant didn't do this and would never violate conditions of release.
She makes a point.
That shows you that on the community aren't ever going to disclose if there is a violation. And what that also shows is that they don't believe when victims come forward.
Woo.
And that has been shown throughout the history of the defendant's 30 years where these allegations have come out.
Wow.
So although, yes, there's some argument that he has all of this support, that's great, people should have support, but I also think it shows the power that the defendant has over the community, this position that they blindly believe him and that they won't report any violations to this court. I wrote this in my motion that also when it comes to conditions of release, the defendant was notified about his warrant, or at least we knew he was notified because his attorney called our office on the 9th. That warrant was issued for his arrest on January 9th. Mr. Dodd called Miss Lyon asking her to cancel the warrant and that they wanted to avoid the extradition process so he could get here sooner and deal with what's in front of him. Miss Lyon told Mr. Dodd, we are not canceling the warrant, despite the email that they provided to this court saying we never responded. We had already responded prior to that email, that we weren't canceling the warrant and he can get here however he can. What's important when it comes to conditions of release is how he acted during these 5 days before he turned himself in. The state isn't concerned about the statement he made. What the state is concerned about is that, again, the defendant is using his control.
True.
And deciding when he wants to comply with an order. That order did not say, sure, turn yourself in 5 days. That order was for him to be arrested and him to come deal with these charges. Instead, he drove 2,000 miles, as he stated in his statement to TMZ.
Wow.
He got a polygraph. I believe, at least from the report, it said it was done on the 16th, the same day he turned himself in, and that he did this ABLE testing, which I believe was the day prior. I'm not saying that defendants don't have a right to fight their case. They do, and they very much should. But what that shows, that behavior, that conduct, that shows this court, is that the defendant is only going to comply when he wants to, when he's ready to.
Okay.
When it's most comfortable for him. That's what the defendant has already showed this court. Not that he's going to comply immediately with these conditions that the court could set. Further, this court cannot have pretrial do house calls They cannot confirm that he is not around children. GPS is not going to tell this court if he is around children or talking to witnesses, or anything that the underlying facts of this case is the concern of. This is not a drug case where pretrial services can test them to make sure they're still not using substances. What pretrial services can do is nothing that satisfies the safety of the community. This court, and I do want to note this, that the defendant made through counsel an argument that this motion should also be denied because we routinely file these PDMs. As the court knows, I prosecute child sex abuse cases, child death cases, child physical abuse cases, the people where conditions can't be set. So yes, it is routine in SBU because of these offenders, because of how dangerous they are, how manipulated they are, how that no one wants to believe children when they actually disclose, when people point out anything else they can to actually discuss the facts of this case or the cases. That's why PDMs are filed. And this case is no different. And the state believes that there are no conditions that this court can set for this defendant and defendants similar in his position.
Okay.
I think I've addressed F6E, the factors to indicate if he may or may not commit new crimes. I think his history speaks for himself. I think his position and how he wants to control the narrative and how to comply also shows how he will perform on conditions of release, or if there is a likelihood he could commit new crimes. The last factor is if a PDM has ever been filed before. There's no other cases here in New Mexico, a PDM is not, and so that factor should weigh neutrally. Briefly, I do want to just discuss the ABLE. Can you tell me the time?
Yeah, you've got 15 minutes left.
When it comes to the ABLE and the polygraph that defense has provided. Polygraphs, although allowed here in New Mexico, I would ask the court give less weight to, because we don't have raw data. Defendant didn't provide us with that. And the polygraph does not address what this hearing is about. Those questions had nothing to do with if he was going to comply with conditions of release. And a PDM hearing isn't really for a mini trial to decide the truth about what happened in this case. So I would ask that the court give limited weight to the polygraph and also how that was conducted and when and what that really shows about conditions of release. When it comes to the ABLE testing that was also done before he turned himself in, really this is to show, it does not show anything about their risk. It shows if they are sexually interested in a certain type.
What?
And essentially they're looking at a computer screen of photos. It's very subjective. It depends on the questionnaire that was presented before, which the state does not have. And it's also, there's a lot of debate about the reliability of the ABLE testing. And again, it doesn't address any conditions of release. Here in this case, it's really a risk factor to sex offenders. And if he's claiming he's not a sex offender, I'm unsure why an ABLE testing has anything to do with this, even to show that he is not attracted to minors. I think what is important here is not necessarily about what the ABLE test provides, but that the defendant had an opportunity to do these things.
Okay.
It doesn't matter who he's attracted to. We know that all different types of sex offenders prey on different demographics of people. It doesn't have to be children. They do not have to be a pedophile for this to happen. It's the opportunity that the defendant had and has had over these last 30 years, and with the time that he had with these victims in this case.
Okay.
Just briefly, I want to address that the attacks on witnesses' characteristics don't eliminate the risk of the defendant.
What?
That the studio's investigation really has nothing to do with a criminal investigation, and I think the court has seen the minimal investigation that they have done. And most importantly, when it comes to conditions of release, that this court can't set any conditions that is going to protect any other child, any other victim, any other witness from reporting or continuing reporting. The court can't set conditions to secure that. There's no way anyone can monitor that behavior. And what we know is the defendant has a history, and that's what the court should consider, is the facts, not all the speculation that the defense has provided for their argument that has nothing to do with conditions of release.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll save my last couple minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Ms. Brandenburg.
There's his wife. Look at her.
Okay, Mr. Dunn.
That was the prosecutor. Now his lawyer is going to get up and say his piece. I have I don't even know how many pages of notes. We're going to have to go over everything we just heard. Okay.
First,
But this
I'd
first.
like to let the court know we've supplied a binder for the court that has all of the exhibits and everything in it. It's
okay. I saw
yellow
I got my
binder
own
there. Perfect.
with my notes.
Secondly, I'd like to apologize for consuming what I imagine was a lot of the court's time this long
It's
week.
okay.
So I'd like to tell the court how we intend to structure our hour in this case.
Okay.
I'm going to give some brief introductory remarks, followed by one witness. And then Ms. Fairberg will take over for argumentation. I would ask at this time that the court accept defendant's exhibits A through BB
Yep, they're all admitted.
as reliable. Thank you. Ms. Brandenburg just referred to this mountain of evidence that the court has before it as speculative. This is not speculative. What the court has before it is, I would estimate, probably the most comprehensive response to a motion for pretrial detention that has ever been filed in this state. And it was
Oh my
amassed
God.
in 7 days. 7 days. And that's the evidence that we were able to put together. Every aspect of the state's case is flawed. Every aspect of the state's case is questionable. I don't need to tell the court this, but my client is presumed innocent. As he sits here today, he is an innocent man. And I have significant concerns about the prosecution talking as if he has already been convicted. She referred to the people who wrote letters of support. She said, quote, They don't believe when victims come forward. It's our legal system that starts from the position of saying, we don't believe. It must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
I mean, that's true. That's not false.
The question before the court today is the court going to hold Mr. Busfield in custody pending the trial in this matter, if we ever get that far?
Ooh, ooh.
There has not yet been an indictment. We have not received a target notice.
It's going to grand jury, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
We have not received a target notice.
Do you guys have a date for that yet?
I do, but if the court wants it, I'd ask for it to be in private.
Okay.
Comply.
Okay.
The state's arguments are based on a fallacy.
Oh.
Their fallacy is heads we win, tails you lose. You don't bring any evidence to pretrial detention hearings, you're dangerous. We're going to detain you. You bring a bunch of evidence, that's how powerful he is. That's how terrible he is. We detain him. That's their argument here today. I want to compare the state's presentation of evidence with the defense presentation of evidence. 6 exhibits. 6 exhibits. That's what the state has brought. They've brought Odyssey printouts, and then really the meat of their case is a criminal complaint and several police reports, all authored by the same person, Detective Brown, the person who was in charge of this investigation. And as we make clear in our papers, there are significant concerns about what Mr. Brown, or Detective Brown, includes in his reports and doesn't include. Ms. Brandenburg, during argument, stated that, oh, well, only what's relevant goes into the criminal complaint. And Ms. Fairberg is going to play this for the court later, but when the children were first talked to by the police in this case.
The 2 audio clips.
Correct.
Thank you for sending those. I did listen to those.
Great. As the court is well aware then, it wasn't simply that the children did not disclose
Right.
sexual abuse.
I pointed this out earlier.
They flat out denied it.
That.
They said, no, it didn't happen. The fact is that the criminal complaint in this case is slanted. It is slanted to bolster the state's case and omit exculpatory evidence. The evidence that we brought to court, the evidence favoring Mr. Busfield, cannot be used in the way the state is claiming. Oh, somehow bringing evidence should be weighing in their favor. And the court cannot indulge this kind of argument. Evidence favoring Mr. Busfield can only be interpreted one way, in his favor. It would turn our justice system upside down to say that if somebody defends themselves, it must mean that they are dangerous. It must mean that we should hold them in custody, because the ultimate result is that every single person would be held. The last thing that I want to talk about in my opening is this self-surrender process. Ms. Brandenburg said that it was 5 days. It was 3.5 days, Friday evening to Tuesday morning. All actions that Mr. Busfield took during that time were at my direction to mount a defense. I tried to negotiate with the district attorney's office. I told them, he's coming here, he'll come here. We do not need to go through a month or 2 month long extradition process. He'll be here. And they told me, you can do whatever you want. we're not going to do a thing. So I brought him here. He drove 2,000 miles in 2 days. 2 days. And then we spent one afternoon doing a psychosexual risk assessment and one morning doing a polygraph. And then we self-surrendered at MDC. I think that shows how seriously Mr. Busfield takes this case. It shows he is ready to fight this case, going to fight this case, and he is going to do it with respect for the law. An arrest warrant is not an order to a defendant. An arrest warrant is an order to the police.
True, true.
But my client, knowing that the police were ordered to arrest him, wanted to confront these allegations. So, Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to call our first witness, our only witness.
First and only
And then
witness.
Ms. Fairberg will make an argument. And so at this time, the defense calls Alan Caudillo.
First witness coming up. I don't know who this man is. He looks happy. He's galloping up to the front, prancing, galloping. Okay, apparently there was supposed to be up to a dozen witnesses, but they're only calling one apparently.
Good afternoon, sir. Sorry, do you swear to affirm that the testimony here is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Hey, please have a seat. Have you testified before?
I haven't.
Okay, so everything's being recorded in this microphone here, so please just be sure to speak loudly and clearly into that. The
I
attorneys
should sit, right?
Yep. And the attorneys are going to ask you some questions now. Okay, Mr. Dodd.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please state your name for the record?
Alan Caudillo.
And Mr. Caudillo, what do you do for a living?
I'm a director of photography on movies and television shows.
What is a director of photography?
Director of photography supervises all the photography for a project, hires crew, and in television shows, guides guest directors through the process of that particular show.
And as a director of photography, do you work closely with the director on any given project?
Yes.
And how long have you worked in the film industry?
Over 35 years.
How many projects have you worked on?
Hundreds of projects.
How many days of filming do you think you've done?
Thousands.
And are you a member of any unions?
I am. I'm a member of the International Cinematographers Guild, Local 600, and of the Directors Guild of America, TGA.
And have you worked on any projects that I might have heard of?
Yeah. Probably the biggest project I worked on was The Hangover. I was one of the directors of photography on The Hangover and Hangover 2.
Woo!
Now, I want to turn and I want to talk about The Cleaning Lady. Did you work on a television show called The Cleaning Lady?
I did.
And what was your role on The Cleaning Lady?
I was the lead director of photography for seasons 1 through 4.
Were there more than 4 seasons of The Cleaning Lady?
No, it was canceled after the 4th season.
So you were the lead director of photography for all 4 seasons.
Correct.
And as the lead director of photography on The Cleaning Lady, did you interact with Timothy Busfield?
I did. Tim came to us season 2 at the end of the season, episode 11. So he came as a guest director on that. And then they brought him back seasons 3 and 4.
For seasons 3 and 4?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Why did they bring him back?
He was well liked by the cast and the crew. Did an excellent job, and they needed somebody to help supervise future directors who were going to be guests to help them do that process for season 3 and 4. So he was a producer director for those last 2 seasons.
Okay. Yeah, what does that mean, being a producer director?
Part of it is really he's helping to make sure that each guest director comes in understands the process and knows the ins and outs of working with the cast, understands the quirks of the crew or locations, and then also he supervises editing and music things and casting to some extent. So he's there to be a guide for the series.
So just so I'm clear, Mr. Busfield was involved with the cleaning lady for season 2, episode 11, and then all of season 3 and 4.
Correct. Yeah, he was directed 1 episode season 2, and then I think 2 episode 3 and 2 episode 4.
Okay, so he directed a total of 5 episodes.
I believe it's 5. Yeah, I believe it was 5.
Okay, that's not what I thought.
Now, have you reviewed the criminal complaint in this case?
I did read it. I saw it on deadline.
And are you aware of the allegations by, and I want to refer them by their initials, okay? Let's just make sure we do that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of the allegations by SL in this case?
I am, from that complaint.
And you know when I refer to SL, you know who I'm talking about, correct?
I do.
And based on your review of the criminal complaint, what is your understanding of the nature of the allegations in this case?
I'm sorry, I don't. My understanding of the nature, like what happened?
What does he say happened?
Oh, he said that Tim touched him inappropriately on set.
And was that during filming? Do you know?
It seemed to me from the complaint he was saying it was on set while we were filming. You'd said, I think I remember reading, he said something like, when he cut, he would come in and that's what he would do.
Okay. Now, as the director of photography, did you work on every episode that Mr. Busfield directed?
I did.
Did you work closely with him on each of those episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked very closely with all of the directors, and that first episode he was a guest, so it was one of my jobs as we've been there for 2 years, is to make sure he understands our process, gets to know the cast and crew, sets and things like that. So we worked very, very closely. I never left his side.
Okay. So is it possible that Mr. Busfield inappropriately touched SL on the set of The Cleaning Lady?
No.
Why not?
Film sets may seem chaotic if you're an outsider, but everything we do is incredibly regimented. We're all a group of professionals who all know what they need to do, a lot of times without being told. And at any given time, if the child was on set, there was at minimum of 10 people there on the set with them. It's just how it works. There's 2 cameras, 2 camera operators, 2 focus pullers, 2 boom guys, a prop person, a hair and makeup person, the studio person would usually be there, the first assistant director, 2 dolly reps. And that's for every take, for every shot, always, especially with the children, because we had such a limited amount of time with the children. If they were on the set, we would bring them on and start rolling, because once the rules are such, if we go over, that's it, we're done. And we have to not shoot the scene and go over and spend a ton of money. So every second of their time was regimented. We often wouldn't even rehearse with the children, especially with these young guys. They weren't the best actors. They were perfect look for the show, but they weren't the best performers. So we would rehearse with the stand-in, which was an adult, and then we would just bring them in and have them do the part. So they a lot of times they wouldn't even be there for rehearsals.
I want to shift and talk now about these boys and their parents, okay?
Oh boy.
Um,
Look at the cop back there on his phone.
During
texting.
filming of The Cleaning Lady, did you get to know the boys and their parents?
Yes.
And how much did you interact with those 4 people?
Well, not a ton, but I always take care. I always make sure I get to know the cast very well, and the crew as well, but the cast, and try to get to know the parents of children when they come on the set, so they feel comfortable, know that we're there taking care of their children, and they feel comfortable. So I got to know them. I would see them when they would come to set.
Okay.
And we did occasionally see them after, at rap parties and things like that.
Rap parties?
Well, like when it's over, they need to go and have dinner and, to celebrate the season.
Great. The boys' parents, what were they like?
I think the mother she always seemed very, very nervous and anxious and very quiet and reserved. The father was very aggressive, really very talkative, but didn't really seem to say much, just very aggressive, very kind of alpha male sort of guy. Seemed like a typical sort of aggressive set parent.
Okay.
Was there anything that the father did that seemed odd to you?
Yeah, I mean, yes. He was overly aggressive with me. I feel like he was always trying to be my friend or wanting to.
That's a good dad if he was overly aggressive with these people.
Or golf or things like that. And I wasn't really that interested in that. Something he did do that for me that made me uncomfortable, and it was addressed earlier, was that he would have the kids, if we came on set and, if I was giving a high five to the kids and they missed it, the father would go, hey, go give Mr. Allen a hug. And that made me feel uncomfortable because I would never let my kids, just force my kids to hug somebody. There should be something that they want to do, or it's, mutual, not, say you have to hug somebody. So that really kind of.
Okay, he's implying children can consent to physical contact with adults.
Didn't really know.
Did it seem like the father was trying to force relationships, like between you and the children and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it did. I felt like, he wanted, honestly, I don't think he understood what I did. I'm not, a director of photography is a below the line person. We're not bosses. I'm a boss of my group, the lighting, the grip, and the camera people, but I'm not a decision maker. I don't cast. I don't do things like that. And I think he might have misunderstood what I did because people would listen to me on set because I'm giving people, put that light there, put that camera there.
You mean you seemed important?
I seemed important. And I think he thought, okay, then I better make sure that he's got a good relationship with that guy.
I see. Now, I want to ask you about the kids leaving the show. How did the kids end up leaving?
Well, a couple things happened. Well, several things happened. One, because of COVID, our schedule got extended. So when we started the project, when they shot the pilot in 2021, we didn't really even start shooting the series until I think the summer of 22. So it's a year later. So these children have already grown up, and the show takes place in really, I think the whole series, all 4 seasons of the show, I think take place in like a 1 year or maybe a year and a half of time. It was story-wise, it was compressed. And so because of, of circumstances, we had big writers and actors strike. So we ended up pushing, and the kids kept growing, so, by the time we started really shooting, by the time we got to season 3, they had grown different heights, or different heights, and their facial structures had changed, right? So they just didn't look like they did at the end even of the prior season. And it became, I think, clear that we needed to make a change. It wasn't my decision, but the studio decided. Okay.
And have you heard about how the parents took it when they were informed that the children were not becoming back?
I did hear. I was not there when that happened because we had already finished. That happened after we were starting season 4.
Okay.
Prepping season 4, not shooting. And I heard that they took it very badly, that they were very, very upset.
Now, I want to ask you just one additional line of questioning. How much pay did the kids get for each episode?
I honestly can't say. I'm not, like I said, I'm the working guy, not the producer. Sure. I had heard that it was, like around 50 to 60 grand, something like that.
Per episode?
Per episode. I think that was between the two.
Like combined?
Combined, yeah. Okay. Again, I'm not a producer. Nobody ever gave me a budget, so I don't know.
But that's what you heard.
That's what I heard, and that doesn't seem out of bounds for what that rate is for what actors make.
Okay. And how many episodes were there in season 1?
Season 1 was 10 episodes.
And how many episodes were there in seasons 2 and 3?
I believe those were 12 episodes. Each, yeah.
So 34 episodes?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
So over the course of those 3 seasons, we're talking millions of dollars.
Yeah, not my strong suit, but yeah, that's like $1.5 million, something like that. Brooke?
I don't think math is your strong suit.
It is not my, I'm sorry, no, it's not.
Now, Mr. Cordillo, do you have any idea how much of that money would have to actually be set aside for the children?
I do actually. My son was in a commercial, a nationwide commercial when he was 5 years old. I was shooting the commercial, and so then I was able to get him in, which is great. But it was a significant amount of money. It was a Super Bowl commercial. And so I was told we had to start a thing called a Coogan account, which is, that you create a fund that isolates the money from the parents. So when the kid turns 18, they get that money. And interestingly, I thought it's 15%. But
Sorry.
15% is what they need to
Put aside.
Yeah, but I actually thought it was the opposite, and I put 85% in the Coogan, thinking
Relevance.
because it was shocking to me that parents can take 85% of their child's income.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Where are we going with
It
this?
was so absurd to me. I put 85 in and not 15.
And so the parents get to keep, if they choose, 85% of the money that their
Yeah.
children make.
It's considered income, but yeah, they can spend it as they will. There's no rule against it.
If I could have one moment, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Okay. Ms. Brandenburg-Cope, do you have any questions for Mr. Cordillo?
I do, Your Honor.
Awesome. Can you spell your last name for me?
It's Caldillo, C-A-U-D as in Denver, I-L-L-O.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
My understanding that you wrote an affidavit,
I did.
and when did you write that?
I believe it was the 13th
Of January?
of January, yeah. I believe. I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of it, and I'm not great with dates either.
That's okay.
I'm not working, so, every day is just today.
That's okay. If you need a copy, I have one if you need to see it. So you stated, and in your affidavit, that you were with Mr. Busfield 100% of the time.
On set, yes.
On set. So did you see him tickling and picking up the boys?
I never saw him tickling or picking up the boys.
You know that he did say he did tickle the boys.
I
And
think
got
it was
them
in the complaint, but yeah. But I never saw him tickling or picking up the boys.
Also, you, in your affidavit and just now, you stated that the dad of the victims,
Mm-hmm.
and you had some concerns about him,
Yeah, he just felt weird to me. He was kind of creepy, to be honest with you.
and that you didn't like that he had his boys hug you.
He had his boys hug everybody. And so I just thought that, again, that this is just my personal belief about how I raise my children, which is that I wouldn't force my children to do something.
Okay.
That could be, it's just weird. So
So did you continue to hug the boys when they?
I actually rarely hug the boys. I would always I would do a high five or, just do like as simple as I could. Again, he's a parent. He gets to choose how he raises his children. I am uncomfortable with that.
Did you tell him that you had concerns, saying, I don't want to hug your boys?
Yeah, he's their parent, and I trust that he's doing what he feels like is the best he could do. I have concern with that.
Right, but for you, since you didn't want them hugging you, you never told their father.
No, I didn't say I didn't want them hugging me. I just said I'm concerned that a parent would force a child to hug a stranger like that. The child would say, "Hey, go hug that person."
But
I like kids. I like to hug kids, and I'm not saying I love my kids, and I love these little boys, and I wanted them to be happy and healthy, right? So, I'm just saying, for me, that was a concern for me as I looked at the father.
did you ever have discussions about that with anyone else on set?
No.
When did you read the criminal complaint?
Whenever it came out on deadline, to be honest, it came out on deadline, and I downloaded it and read it.
And who contacted you to write this affidavit?
Woo!
Melissa, Tim's husband, asked if I would write something.
Tim's wife.
Correct.
Okay. And did you send that to Mr. Dodd's firm?
Yes, they contacted me and asked if I would do it, and I said yes. So I wrote it and sent. I actually think I sent it to Melissa
Okay.
And then she forwarded it to.
And you are aware at that time when you wrote this that the defendant did admit to tickling the boys on set?
I'm aware that I'm sorry, could you rephrase that question?
You were aware,
I'm going to object.
Overruled. Go ahead.
thank you. You were aware, because you read the criminal complaint,
Uh-huh.
that the defendant admitted to tickling the boys on set.
Well, it was in the complaint that said you tickled them.
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Dodd, did you have any other questions for Mr. Cardio?
I could have one moment.
Sure.
She just got him. She just gathered him right up. There's Timothy
I don't have
Busfield's
any further questions.
wife. Okay, he said he doesn't have any further questions. So the witness just got.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to hand it off to my partner, Ms. Fairberg, to make argument. Thank you.
Oh, she's smiling. She don't look too sad and
Come with a
upset.
lot of gear.
I see that.
Okay, so now she's going to do her argumentation after the witness just did the questions.
We've all been busy this weekend. There's a lot of things, so I just want to be organized here for the court. Your Honor, I want to start with a presumption, not just in New Mexico, but in our system in general, and this comes from United States versus Salerno, out of the United States Supreme Court. In our society, and I quote, Your Honor, quote, "In our society, liberty is the norm, and detention prior to trial or without trial is the carefully limited exception." That's based on the presumption of innocence that Mr. Dodd spoke about earlier, and it's echoed by Article 2, Section 13 of the New Mexico State Constitution, and of course, Rule 5409. This is in addition to the principle articulated in Gerstein versus Pugh that an accused may not be held absent a finding of probable cause. And Your Honor, I recognize that there's a finding of probable cause here by the Metropolitan Court judge signing the affidavit. But I actually want to encourage Your Honor to, in considering all of the evidence that was not available to that judge at that time, all of the pieces that were misconstrued in the complaint, as Mr. Dodd said, that does not appear to have been a neutral piece of evidence. I would actually encourage Your Honor to keep it in the back of your mind. Is there really even probable cause in this case? But setting that aside, what we in this state have asked and required of the state of New Mexico is that they must prove both dangerousness and that no conditions, no combination of conditions could keep the community safe, that they have to prove that by the exacting standard of clear and convincing evidence. Now, as Your Honor is aware, there's a lot of evidentiary latitude in these hearings, but that's not a reduction of their burden. All of that evidence, whether it's by a proffer, criminal complaint, things that wouldn't be admissible at trial, it still needs to be, according to the rule, reliable proof. It still needs to be reliable. And our Supreme Court in Mascareno versus Hadel has described that burden, clear and convincing, as evidence, and quote, Your Honor, quote, "evidence that instantly tilts the scales in the affirmative when weighed against the evidence in opposition." The state's nowhere near close to such an instant tilt. Not even close. And Your Honor, I'm not going to rehash every single one of the 5409 factors, although I will touch on them throughout my argument, but please let me know if you have a question about any one of them. But the state bases its motion on two: the nature and circumstances of the offense charged and the history and characteristics of the defendant. We just heard Ms. Brandenburg address the defense's concern that the state of New Mexico, both in public statements and now here in court, has acknowledged that, yeah, when they accuse someone of a crime against children, as a matter of routine, they file for pretrial detention. That's not what our law contemplates. This isn't meant to be routine. This is the carefully limited exception. And what we see is an approach that does not treat it as such. Basing the detention on charges alone is just not enough.
Okay.
And again, I want to read to you, Your Honor, from Mascareno versus Hadel, because our New Mexico Supreme Court has addressed this dead on, of whether the allegations, the nature of the charge, the statute under which a defendant is charged, is that enough? Is that enough for pretrial detention? And they tackle it head on and they say no. And I quote, "To allow the state to rely solely on the nature and circumstances of the charged offenses, not only to prove that the defendant poses a future threat to others or the community, but also to prove that no release conditions will reasonably protect the safety of any other person or the community, would all but eliminate Article 2, Section 13, and the corresponding constitutional burden of the state." Close quote. We just heard Ms. Brandenburg say, yeah, anyone who's charged with a crime against a child is manipulative, cannot be trusted. There's no conditions of release that could possibly control that. And Your Honor, I would push back strongly on that. Not only because our Supreme Court has said explicitly, that's not how we do this. That's not how we do this procedure. But also, I think that really minimizes the power of the court, the power of pretrial services. The idea here, and I just want to address this up front, the idea here, based on this pattern that the alleged pattern that I will address of brought forward by the state, what I understand they're saying is that there is an allegation Mr. Busfield has, over the decades that he has been in Hollywood, has exploited his power for touching, mostly, by the way, post-pubescent adult women. So again, I think there's a disconnect here that undermines the allegations in this case, but that there is
16 and 17-year-olds are not adult women, but okay.
I think we need to acknowledge the reality of the world that we live in, that power is gone. The state has canceled Mr. Busfield. His talent agency has dropped him. He's been edited out.
What about them 87 letters? Is that power gone?
Just about to be released? Not. He has no power. He is persona non grata. And that's not because he did anything wrong. As Mr. Dodd has very well said, he's presumed innocent. But that's because of the world we live in. And it's because that these allegations, this complaint, is not only all over New Mexico, all over the national media, it is all over the world.
True.
It's too late. That bell can't be unrung. The idea that he could then go out and be dangerous with a child in the world where everybody knows who he is absurd. That's absurd. Or that he could exploit power. He's not getting anybody any roles. He's not advancing anybody's career. And I think what this shows, Your Honor, is that the state is not acknowledging the individualized circumstances of the defendant, not acknowledging the reality, because what they're doing is they're proceeding as a matter of routine. So I just wanted to get that out there in the open. But now, Your Honor, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about these exhibits that the state has characterized as largely irrelevant, which I frankly find incredible. This evidence was compiled, as Mr. Dodd said, not by the state, not through some nefarious means by the defendant who's been in custody, but through a legal team, and mostly through people reaching out to us. Because again, this has been all over the global media. This is no secret. I don't know why this evidence is not portrayed in the criminal complaint. I don't know why this evidence has not been considered by the state of New Mexico. I'm frankly surprised, given the weight of this evidence. I'm going to say it outright, Your Honor. There is not a universe in which the state has the evidence, and we've received their discovery. We received it on Friday, as you know. There's not a universe that they could prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. It's impossible. So the fact that we're here, again, I feel like we're in an incredible situation right now. So what this evidence shows is, one, the state's witnesses aren't credible. And although Ms. Brandenburg-Koch said that that's not relevant to the detention inquiry, yes, it is. Of course it is. Because again, Your Honor has to base your decision on reliable proof. Well, if the allegations aren't credible, if the witnesses aren't credible, it's not reliable. The other thing that this pile of evidence shows is that the complaint itself isn't credible, meaning the actual four corners of the complaint. There are so many omissions, so many independent people coming forward to say, I've been misrepresented in there. And again, it's not, nobody's seeking these people out. And then finally, it shows that the allegations aren't credible. And I heard Ms. Brandenburg-Koch say a couple of times that the defense argument that the allegations aren't credible doesn't hold water because the boys have never said that this happened alone. That's not true. That's not true. Again, this is a case that has had evolving allegations. But as we see in Defense's Exhibit I, Your Honor, the second Warner Brothers independent investigation, which directly addresses the allegations herein, but the state did not include or reference in its criminal complaint, specifically says, and I'll just go ahead, I'm going to skip forward, and I quote, Your Honor, from, again, that's Defense's Exhibit I, that the allegation was that Mr. Busfield had isolated the twins, quote, out of sight and sound, quote. That's the allegation. The fact that these allegations have evolved only makes them less credible. That actually, no, it wasn't out of sight and sound. It was where everybody could see it. It was, so I just want to put that out there now. I want to start with the criminal complaint. And Your Honor, I'd like to use my microphone here. I'd like to play, for Your Honor, Defense Exhibit Z. This is an audio-only clip of the first interview that police had with the boys in 2024. And Ms. Brandenburg-Koch has said, it's not good practice to be asking kids questions before a safe house. I agree. And what this evidence shows is that there's been a good year and a half of their parents coaching them along before the safe house. So I agree. But this is in the beginning. This is the first time they speak. And so this starts with VL, Your Honor. And assuming that my technological prowess is not terrible, I'm going to play it for you.
And you know what's right and wrong, right?
Hold on, we're going to start over. And obviously, I'm not playing the whole interview, for Your Honor.
And you know what's right and wrong, right? Where people can't touch, where people can't do. Yeah, you know that, right? Does Tim ever do that?
No, he's never touched me.
Never touched you?
Yeah.
In like, your private areas, right?
Yeah.
Never did that?
Never.
Okay.
Let's go on, Your Honor, to Defense Exhibit AA. This is 5 minutes later, separate. The boys were separated. The same police officer, this time speaking to SL, out of the presence of his brother.
So, you know what's right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
No one can touch your private areas?
Yeah, but he doesn't touch them.
Doesn't touch your private parts? Okay.
That's not, Your Honor, a failure to disclose. That's an express denial. And the officer followed up just to make sure he didn't touch your private areas, because the conversation before, I'll express to Your Honor, the conversation before that was, does Tim tickle you ever? And they said, well, my shoulder sometimes. Do you like it? I kind of like it. I kind of don't like it. And then they went into the conversation about the private parts. This was not a failure to disclose. This was an express denial. And I want to talk, Your Honor, about the medical records that the state has referenced. We did not submit them as exhibits, but given the state's argument today, I would like to read a couple of pieces from it. And that is because the state's made the assertion that SL reported to his therapist unprompted and, not to parents. It didn't come from parents. And what we see from the records is that's not accurate. It's not accurate. This complaint is not credible. This is from, I'm just going to read a portion. I'm going to read a few portions, but this one is from one of the very first notes. And in the room are SL, his father, Ronald Rodas, and the therapist. These are her notes. And I quote, "Father then told client that client needs to trust therapist and feel safe to talk about the abuse so that client and family can heal." Only after that did then SL say, okay, well, here's the abuse. This was not a spontaneous disclosure that happened with someone he trusted. This was in the presence of looking at dad. And the reason we know that is because there are other medical records that say, there are so many things, and I want to make sure I've got the right one for your honor. Okay. There's an allegation in the complaint that SL was having nightmares, suffering from PTSD from this abuse. Well, what the medical records show is actually he wasn't. He wasn't having nightmares. When his father is not in the room with him, when his father's not in the room with him, SL tells the therapist that he's waking up at night, and I quote, "waking up at night due to being too hot or too cold." His father tells that client is having a nightmare when client wakes up, but client does not remember it. Multiple times throughout the medical records, multiple times, SL tells the therapist, "I wake up because I'm hot." And then the therapist says, "Well, why don't you tell your dad that you're not having nightmares, that you're just hot?" And then this is what he says to that. Client, quote, "Client feels the need to please his father and at times is scared to tell him what's going on due to fears of disappointing him." These aren't credible, non-exaggerated allegations. These are manufactured allegations.
Wow.
This complaint omits all of that history. But not only that, we know that it also misconstrues conversations with its own witnesses. I'd like to play for your honor Defense Exhibit S. This is a voicemail left, not solicited, left to the Busfield family's personal attorney. This is a voicemail from her.
Hi, this is Danielle Behill. I'm reaching out regarding Timothy Busfield. I noticed that I was in the police report for his warrant, and I was not very happy with how the detective twisted and used my words and just picked and choose what he wanted to put into that report. I don't feel comfortable with a man sitting in jail right now when I know what I said, and that's not everything or twisted words into the report. So I would like to be able to speak with someone about that because this has gotten kind of out of hand. So thank you. My phone number is 505.
We won't play her phone number for everybody, Your Honor. She's not the only one. States, defendant's exhibit, I keep saying states, defendant's exhibit L is an affidavit of Kristen Carr. She says the same thing. She says that the detective omitted from the criminal complaint things that she thought were crucial. That set teachers never left the boys unsupervised, that there were always 20 to 30 people in the room, and that she never saw the kids ever alone or somewhere where other people could not observe. But now let's get to the crux of it, because this is something Ms. Brandenburg-Koch talked about, the parents here, the parents. The issue is not that people with a criminal history cannot be the victims of crimes. That's not what this is.
That's not, oh, there was a DWI here or there was a conviction back there. That's not what this is. I think I'll say it the most simply. These two parents have a documented history. They're con artists, actual con artists. Ronald Rodas, Defendant's Exhibit A, the DOJ's press release. The DOJ's press release after he was convicted of wire fraud, defrauding 1,500 homeowners during the mortgage crisis through a sham law firm of over $6 million, served 3 years in prison, and was disbarred in the state of California.
What?
And this is what the DOJ says, and I quote from Defendant's Exhibit A. It is an unfortunate truth that people often take advantage of a crisis for personal gain.
Wow.
The Rodas Law Group was among the worst type of scammers, trying to take advantage of homeowners already experiencing profound heartache in the face of potential foreclosure. I didn't make up the word scammer. That came from the Department of Justice.
Whoa.
And Angel LaSalle was no better. Defendants Exhibit E and F, that's a lawsuit, a civil lawsuit. Again, not just some unrelated idea. This is about stealing. This is about defrauding people. Had a Bentley, sold it for $90,000, didn't turn over the title, had the car unlawfully repossessed, and then fraudulently traded it in for a Porsche 911 in her mother's name. And that's in addition to a domesticated judgment for over $75,000, well, including penalties, but a $75,000 judgment for bad checks written at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas.
No!
Again, these aren't unrelated. So why? I mean, I guess the question here is, if the boys said that this never happened, why are we here? And we're here, it's documented through these witnesses. We're here because those boys lost their role. They lost their role, and exhibit after exhibit talks about, we've got Defendant's Exhibit I, the Warner Brothers investigation, which describes the star of the show, Elodie Young, who was close with the family, saying that after Ronnie and Angel found out that their kids would be recast, actually used the words, they would get revenge on Tim Busfield. We've got the affidavit of Chris Ford, Defendant's Exhibit K, which says the same thing, that he, while out at a dinner with an actress and the family, they were upset. They were visibly upset that the boys wouldn't be back on the show. And same thing, she said she'd get him, quote, have his ass, unquote. This entire criminal complaint is making good on that promise. And to address Ms. Brandenburg-Koch's idea of, well, you don't get money from the criminal process. No, it also wasn't their first stop. They got a civil attorney first in California, who then interacted with Warner Brothers. They didn't contact police, again, until after Warner Brothers in September of last year came out and said, there's nothing behind these allegations. Translate, we're not going to give you any money. Then they went to police. There are other ways in which the complaint mischaracterizes what happened. The idea that Mr. Busfield told these kids to call him Uncle Tim. Both the independent report, Exhibit I, no one ever heard him being called Uncle Tim, except Miss Young, who said she heard Ronald Rodas say, go hug Uncle Tim. That's consistent with what you heard here from Mr. Caudillo. Exhibit N, affidavit of Joe Lotito. Never heard anyone say Uncle Tim. Exhibit BB, this one was just submitted last night. And I quote, she also said that Mr. Busfield never asked to be called Uncle Tim. And I quote from her, I also had the opportunity to observe the twin children referenced in the case and their parents, Angel and Ronnie. I observed the twins' father, Ronnie, telling his children to hug adults on set, including Mr. Busfield. I never saw Mr. Busfield initiate one of these hugs and never heard anyone call him Uncle Tim. Contrary to the allegations in the complaint, Mr. Busfield was not, quote, touchy on set and instead appeared focused and professional, close quote. And finally, Exhibit O, Copper Perry, head of the hair department, same thing. Never saw anything creepy or touchy. The allegations continue to fall apart. And this is under the idea that we've already discussed a little bit, this idea that they are impossible. It's not just Exhibit I. It's not just the independent investigation, which as Ms. Brandenburg characterized as minimal. I don't know why she's using that term, considering they interviewed, I believe, 9 to 12 witnesses over a several-week period and came out with a comprehensive report. I don't see how that's minimal. But in addition to that, Exhibit K, Chris Ford, that someone always had, quote, eyes on Tim Busfield because he was the director. Also said he didn't have his own trailer. This idea that he was causing trouble in his trailer, he doesn't have a trailer as the director. Exhibit L, Kristen Carr. The kids were never alone, always 20 to 30 people around. Exhibit N, Joe Lotito. Kids were never left by the set teacher. He says, and I quote, "It is inconceivable to me that the alleged conduct could have occurred on set because of the number of crew that are always around and working." Quote. Exhibit O, Copper Perry. The boys are always accompanied by a set teacher, never alone. And this is in addition to their parents. Their set teacher, there's also their parents around. The photographs that are referenced in the complaint, which are, I'll tell Your Honor, Mr. Busfield is standing behind the boys, has his arms a little bit around them, and you can see that he's kind of tickling their shoulders. I do the same thing with my kids to get them to smile in a photo.
That's not his kids.
Their mother. This isn't the idea that they discovered these photos later. They took the photos. They were in the photos. And then finally, something we haven't heard from the state at all, it's Defendant's Exhibit P. These are other parents, Erica and Adan Ortega, parents of a child actor who had no concerns, but also said there's always supervision and that they can always observe from monitors, that basically they're never alone. And finally, Exhibit Q, the same thing. The parent, this is the parent of the child that replaced SL and VL. The kids were never alone, said it was a great place to work. The only issue was that they were getting abuse online from family members of the LaSalle and Rodases. And then same thing, Exhibit R, Deborah Toner, her affidavit, quote, "I never observed unaccompanied minors. All minors on set were always accompanied by an appropriate supervising adult." And then, Your Honor, we've got the polygraph. It does matter. It does bear on this proceeding exactly. Because again, if the allegations never happened, we can't detain him. You can't detain him if we say, okay, this probably never happened. There's probably not even probable cause for it, but we do have some unfounded, some as yet unsubstantiated allegations dating back 1991, 1994, again, all with post-pubescent or adult women. No bearing on
One was 16, one was 17.
You can't say, well, it doesn't matter if he says he didn't do this. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. The bottom line, Your Honor, is that the overwhelming evidence is that this didn't happen, is that this was manufactured. And there is a credible story here. And it's a very sad story. And there are victims. And they are still these two boys. But they weren't victimized by Tim Busfield. They were victimized by their own parents who no longer could make money as a lawyer, disbarred, no longer could write bad checks, taking 85% of the money they made on a TV show and then manufactured into victims as revenge. That is what the evidence shows. And I realize I'm running out of time.
You are. So I'm going to push you. You've got 3 minutes left. Are there
Thank
any
you,
of the
Your Honor.
other F6 factors
I'm
you
gonna-
want to address?
One thing I didn't do, Your Honor, was address the history, the alleged history. And I did a little bit. I do encourage Your Honor to look at Defendant's Exhibit Y. I'm sorry, it says Plaintiff's Y. That was me. Mr. Dodd would never make that mistake. That's me. That's the affidavit by Matthew Moore, where he talks about that, this was another parent pushing forward on their kid's career. I'm going to go fast. You've seen the public safety assessment. You've seen the ABLE assessment. That is absolutely relevant. It's absolutely relevant because it says he's no risk. So I ask Your Honor, what the state offers is narrative. What Rule 5409 demands is reliable evidence and evidence that points decisively toward release. That's what the evidence points toward right now. The LaSalle Rodas family has already gotten its revenge. Mr. Busfield has been canceled. His career is over. In the span of 6 days, it's done. Edited out of projects, talent agency dropped him, allegations plastered all over global media, pedophilia, his wife under attack. His life is ruined, but his liberty under the rules, under the Constitution, under the facts of this case can be restored. And I ask Your Honor to restore that liberty. And you've got 3 ways to do it. 1, there's no evidence of dangerous, certainly not clear and convincing. There's definitely not clear and convincing evidence that no combination of conditions could keep the community safe. And finally, I ask Your Honor to reconsider the probable cause in this case, because then it would be patently unconstitutional to hold him. He should be released on his own recognizance. But even if Your Honor has any hesitation at all, well, that's easy. That's easy. A no contact with kids order, house arrest here in Albuquerque. He doesn't have a community in Albuquerque. He has no power. There's nowhere to go. This idea that, there's no way for the court to know if people charged with these kinds of crimes can talk to children, that's not how our courts function. We function on the presumption of innocence. And I ask Your Honor to please restore Mr. Busfield's liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Wow.
All right, let's turn back to the state, Ms. Brenda.
Judge, can you just let me know how much time I have?
10 minutes.
Okay, so now the state has 10 minutes to do a rebuttal, which she is about to do now.
Judge, again, I want to make this very clear of what we are here on today. We are here to see if the court agrees that the defendant is dangerous, and if there are conditions the court can set, which the state's argument is there are none. Defendant's exhibits and argument here don't talk about what this case is about. They're trying to fluff, use the parents' history, and that's why these victims, essentially they're saying, are liars and are going to, and they're being coached, even though.
Girl, somebody's alarm.
At least it wasn't me.
I finished early. I had to.
Thank you, Judge.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. There was medical concerns about sexual abuse prior in November of 2024 made by the doctor after seeing the kids in this case. So how this even started was because a doctor, in his experience, was concerned. Not because of anything else besides what he thought and what he saw during presentation of the kids. I've already laid out, and I know the court is very aware of how kids disclose abuse. This is the norm. It is not shocking to the state that they didn't disclose to police right away, especially when the questions were inappropriate. They were leading in everything that best practices say, how kids should not be asked questions. For defense to get up here and say that their disclosures of sex abuse aren't credible because of the parents, even though they have continued to show signs and and continued to disclose the abuse, all very similarly, is what is here in front of the court. Again, this isn't a mini trial, and yes, the court can judge credibility and the weight of the evidence. However, this is one factor. Of course, that's an easy defense to say these parents are liars and they're coaching their kids, and this could never happen. Even though there was concerns back in November of 2024, there was concerns again at therapy when the boys disclosed, there was concerns again with another medical professional, there was more concerns at Safe House. So this isn't a one-time disclosure where parents are telling them what to say. And I know the court is aware about coaching and how difficult it is to coach a child at that age and to continue and remain consistent. Kids are at this age, very black and white. To then say, oh yes, I'm gonna lie and exactly how my parents told me to say it, even though they were able to give details of how he touched them. They corroborate the defendant's statement that, yeah, he did tickle them all over, which I think is important because defenses, all of their exhibits contradict what the defendant also already admitted to, that this conduct could never happen and nobody saw anything. The witness himself said, I was with him 100% of the time, but never saw this tickling or touching, even though the defendant himself said he did it on set and getting them ready to act. So that is not reliable when the defendant's own testimony, own statement to police is that he did in fact touch them. And if defense wants to say that the civil suit is the standard here, the defendant also has a civil suit, a sexual assault civil suit.
Oh, she really tore him up on that one.
It shows a pattern.
Oh.
It shows a history of his characteristics. The defendant is famous, wealthy, influential, as you can see by all of the exhibits provided, which all these character witnesses, these 87 letters he was able to get in 7 days.
Woo-hoo!
The victims, the way that these cases are brought forward is by what victims say, not what their parents are telling the police. And we have to, if there's other credible evidence that their disclosures are credible, we move forward. I don't get to discriminate because they have a history, and neither should this court. The victims are little boys. They didn't have power. They didn't have money. They don't have influence to get all of this support to show how they're not lying.
Wow.
Why? It's not only the defendant's reputation. Defense has leaked all of these exhibits.
True.
And has gone after the parents to show this narrative that it's all the parents making this up. The boys at 11 years old can't even comprehend how to get revenge and what this would do, and why put themselves in a position to be criticized, to be called liars, to continue to go through trauma. They were diagnosed, and very much so, therapists know about coaching. And if the therapist had a concern about coaching, would have put it in her note and would have disclosed that to the detective as well. There was no indication that she was concerned about coaching. Neither was there concern about doctors thinking there was coaching going on by the parents, by professionals that know how children disclose. Abusers, especially people that go after people that don't have a lot of authority, children, people that, are employees or work on a set, they take advantage of this very dynamic.
Woo!
No one's going to believe them because they have this history.
True.
They're kids. They delayed disclosed. Most importantly, defense has not shown or argued at all that there are conditions of release. House arrest is not a condition that can secure the community. You have 87 letters in front of you, with most of them saying, I would trust him, he would do this, I would trust my kids with him. So you can't tell those people they can't come over with their kids. And we know that they're not going to come forward and say, oh yeah, I did let my kids around them. House arrest is not a proper remedy when we're talking about conditions of release here. There is enough. Probable cause has been found twice in this case already. The boys have continued to disclose, have cooperated, despite than being dragged through the mud in this case. And this is only the beginning, as the court knows. This process is not easy for a victim, let alone for young children. And most importantly, all of their letters go against the reasons why he should be released. That support shows you his power, his influence, that will continue and allow for this behavior. And most importantly, under State versus Begay, is the court has to decide, despite other factors and the risk, is the court willing to take the risk that this could impact the community again? And there is nothing besides the state showing the history of the defendant that weighs for why he should continue to be held. They have proffered no information that he'll comply. In fact, what he has shown is that he will comply when he wants to, when he's ready, what benefits him. And I'm asking the court to hold the defendant because those risks are real, and his history shows this court that those risks are real. There are no conditions this court can set to make sure anybody in the community, anybody in New Mexico, anywhere, that this danger wouldn't happen. The court can't make pretrial do any of those for the concerns in this case. And I'm asking that the case hold the defendant pending trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandenburg.
Wow. Okay, so now I guess we're going to see what the judge has to say next. Girl, I don't even know. Let me put my notes into Word and see how many pages I took. Oh my gosh, it's a lot.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, she's saying something else.
The target letter has been sent. Mr. Dodd has had access to that since the 16th of January.
I'll trust you guys to share that here. Okay.
$23 pages of notes I just took. Oh my Lord.
Okay. The court will find and rule as follows. The question is whether or not the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence that there are no release conditions that would reasonably protect the safety of any other person or the community. It's broken down into the three-part analysis articulated in State versus Groves, and in that analysis, the court considers the factors enumerated in Rule 54906 as required by State versus Anderson. The first question is whether or not the information proffered carries sufficient indicia of reliability to be worthy of consideration. I do find that the state's 6 exhibits and the defendant's 28 exhibits and the court's 2 exhibits and the testimony offered today are reliable for purposes of this decision. The next question is the dangerousness question, the extent to which that information indicates that the defendant may likely pose a threat to the safety of others if released pending trial. I'll back up and note that probable cause was found by the Metropolitan Court judge. We're not set for a preliminary hearing today. I do find that that is sufficient for a probable cause finding for today's purposes. So as to the dangerousness question, based on the nature and circumstances of the present offense, noting that this is a crime where the allegations involve criminal sexual contact of minor children in the general areas, I do find that is inherently dangerous. So I'm satisfied based on those that the state has proven that Mr. Busfield does pose a danger to the safety of others.
Okay.
As to the last question, whether there are any potential pretrial release conditions that would reasonably protect the safety of others, I'll work my way through the F6 factors, first adopting my findings about the nature and circumstances of the present offense. I'll move on to the weight of the evidence. Now, Ms. Brandenburg-Koch is right. It's important to acknowledge the nature of sexual assault cases, and delays in reporting, especially from minor alleged victims, are fairly common. That sort of sexual abuse often occurs in the dark. This situation is a little different in that the allegations involve the defendant being alleged to have committed these acts on a film set. Now, the defendant's presentation, the affidavits from a number of people who worked on that film set, the independent investigation performed by the law firm hired by Warner Brothers, the testimony offered today do not corroborate the allegations offered by the alleged victims in this case. Now, while true, the statement from those children to law enforcement initially and expressly denied that anything occurred, the children then subsequently reported these things. That's not uncommon. As it stands today, based on the limited information I have in front of me, I'll characterize the weight of the evidence against the defendant as neutral at this point in time. As to the defendant's history and characteristics, as included or reflected in Court's Exhibit 1, this defendant exhibits zero criminal history, no misdemeanor or felony history. The state,
I think this judge is about to let him walk.
a number of allegations over the last 30 years, something of a pattern involving allegations of this defendant committing some sort of sexual contact against post-pubescent women. Now, these allegations have not been vetted by the judicial system for various reasons. There being a civil settlement in one of those, a declined prosecution, or no action taken on the exchange of the defendant engaging in therapy. I understand that given the media attention to this case, that more people may come forward with other allegations supporting this pattern. But at this point in time, it's difficult for the court to put too much weight into those allegations as they've not been vetted by the judicial system. I'm concerned about the allegations of this defendant using his position of power on the film set to advance his own personal motive. But the affidavits offered by other people working on the film set do not show that Mr. Busfield has used or abused that position of power. With regards to the nature and seriousness of the danger posed, I'm very mindful of the higher court's guidance in the Begay case in weighing this defendant's risk of reoffending. But given the lack of a pattern involving children in this case, I think that can be remedied through different conditions of release.
He's going to let him out.
For factor E, I don't find that there's been sufficient presentation that this defendant may commit new crimes if released pending trial. There's no evidence of a pattern of criminal conduct. There are no similar allegations involving children in his past. There's no evidence of non-compliance with prior court orders. Rather, this defendant self-surrendered and submitted himself to this court's jurisdiction, demonstrating compliance with the court order for his arrest. There's not been any prior pretrial detention finding. So on the balance, I cannot find that the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence that there are no release conditions that would reasonably protect the safety of any other person in the community. So I am denying the state's motion. I'll take care of that order. That'll be published tomorrow. So Mr. Busfield, I'll set the following conditions of release. You're authorized for release on your own recognizance with the conditions that you appear at all future court settings. You're not violating laws. You'll be supervised by pretrial services here in Albuquerque at a level 2. I'm not going to prohibit your travel. I understand you may not live here, but you will need to report to pretrial services here. You're not to possess any firearms or dangerous weapons. You're not to possess or consume any alcohol or illegal drugs. You must notify the court of your address. You're not to have any contact with the alleged victims or their families, and you're also not to discuss the case with any witnesses. That's what the interpreters and their investigators are there to do. And we can't have you tamper with any of that. And then you need to maintain weekly contact with your attorney in this case. So, Mr. Busfield, do you have any questions for me about what any of those conditions mean?
No, sir.
Okay. So, attorneys, I'll take care of that order tomorrow. Is there anything else the state would request, Ms. Brandenburg?
That I would ask for no contact with children under the age of 18.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No unsupervised contact with any minor children in this case. Mr.
In
Dowd,
this
any other
case?
conditions you'd request?
No, Your Honor, I would ask just if the court can get that filed through your TCA today so that I can.
Oh, this conditions of release? Yeah.
Yes.
I've already, yeah. That'll be filed today.
Thank you.
I'll take care of the full detention order tomorrow. And so with that, anything else, state
Not at this time, Your Honor.
and defense?
No, Your Honor, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. We'll be adjourned.
All rise.
Wow. I think he's just gonna walk right out. I don't know if he's able to leave like at this exact second, or if he has to go back to the jail. There's his wife right there, standing up. Oh wow! I was not prepared for this hearing to last such a long time. They're hugging, they're crying. He's gonna come back home. Wow! Wow! That is crazy. Okay. So I don't want to take the video down just yet because, you know, anything could happen here. We're zooming in on these folks. Okay. Wow. Okay. Now they just turned the video off. Okay. All right. So breaking news, the Timothy Busfield detention hearing has just ended, and I gotta admit I am a bit surprised, but now that I have sat through and listened to both sides of the arguments, I can say I do see the grounds upon which the judge based his decision. He did leave open a lot of room for the circumstances to change. He did say, you know, I understand maybe more allegations will come forward, but in the meantime, for right now, I don't think the state has really made its case that he, you know, as far as reaching the burden here. So something that was argued by Timothy Busfield's lawyers, which also is true, is that in the United States, we have what's called the presumption of innocence. You're presumed, liberty is presumed, and freedom, you know, being outside of jail is presumed. And the reason we have the right to a fair trial is so that nobody is locked up for, you know, unfair reasons, for tyranny or anything like that. So I'll give the brief breakdown here of just like what the judge actually just decided. And then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that I found to be very interesting, some new findings, some new allegations and things like that. So the judge did just now release Timothy Busfield on his own recognizance. I don't even think he put in a bail. I don't think he had to pay bail or bond. I could be mistaken on that. I will go and, you know, double check that or whatever, but I think he was just released on his own recognizance. He's supposed to appear at future court hearings on time and, you know, not miss any future court hearings. These are the conditions of his release. He is to work with the public, the probation office, as a level 2 risk offender or whatever, a level 2, whatever that means. I don't really know. The judge is not going to prohibit his travel. So his lawyers, Timothy Busfield's lawyers, even said, we're willing to let you give him house arrest, please, Your Honor. Just give him house arrest in Albuquerque and make him where he can't leave New Mexico. We're even willing to do that. The judge didn't even go that far. The judge said, no, you can go wherever you want. I understand you're not from here, so you can go back to where you are, but you do have to report to the next hearing, which is the pre-trial preliminary hearing. He's not allowed to own or operate any firearms. He's also not allowed to consume any alcohol or drugs, which in my opinion, if you're going to let somebody be free, I don't really think the judge has any business at all whatsoever prohibiting somebody's alcohol or drug consumption. I think that's very strange. But I'm sure Timothy Busfield is more than happy to follow those rules. He was nodding when the judge said that. He has to, he's supposed to notify the court of his address where he's going to be living. He's not allowed to have any contact with alleged victims. He's not allowed to discuss this case with any witnesses. I do wonder if that includes his wife. Technically, she is a witness. So is he not allowed to discuss this case with his wife? Maintain weekly contact with his own attorney. And then the prosecutor asked for another condition. And that the condition that the prosecutor asked for was to not allow Timothy Busfield to have any contact with any children, anybody under the age of 18. Well, the judge did say, yes, no unsupervised interaction with any minors. And then the judge said, in this case. So I do wonder if the judge meant like any minors, because that seemed to be what the prosecutor was actually asking, like no kids at all. But the judge said in this case. So I don't exactly know what that exactly means. So let me pull up my notes here. I have 25 pages of notes. Oh my God. So the main questions, like we discussed earlier, was, does he pose a threat? Is he dangerous to society and to, flight risk and stuff like that? The judge did not find that he posed enough of a threat that no conditions or set of conditions could possibly mitigate the threat. Now they were supposedly expecting to have a dozen witnesses testifying today. That did not happen. It was only one witness, and it was that director of photography. Okay. Hold on. The judge gave each side 1 hour. The defense had the prosecutors had 6. The prosecutors had 6 exhibits and the defense had a lot of exhibits. I mean, it seemed like over 100. So here's the facts of the case according to the prosecutor. SL and VL were both actors on the show. They were twins, but they were playing one character. Kind of like the twins in Full House were playing one character, Michelle. These SL and VL were playing one character. It was the same. So in the first season, which the boys were in, they did do SL did the primary acting, and then the season 3, VL, his twin brother, did the primary load of the work. Before season 4, there was a back and forth with the kids. So the kids were aware that they might not continue to be cast on this show. After 3 seasons, the boys then, for the first time ever, had to audition in this, quote, back room audition. Well, VL is the only one who auditioned. He auditioned that day. SL did not audition to come back for the next season. The boys were not cast. Of course, one of them didn't even actually audition, but the other one was not cast for the part either. And the state was saying, but these boys were still being used to promote season 4, which was going to be coming up. That brings us to the start of the investigation. There were concerns about abuse. The parents were being tagged in social media posts about Tim Busfield's history. There were concerns. So the parents just asked their sons, hey, we saw some stuff on social media. Have you ever been uncomfortable on the set? The boys said, you mean like with Uncle Tim? Then November 2024 rolls around. The boys are seen by a doctor at the suggestion of their family friend who was a lawyer. They said, why don't you just send them to do a real screening? That was the University of New Mexico Hospital. The doctors in this case did at least see enough that they wanted to refer the case to the police. The police did become involved. They got a medical history, and then the doctors were concerned about grooming, and so were the police. So the cops then, and this is all according to the prosecution. I don't know any of this being true. That I wasn't there. I'm just kind of going over the notes that I took while we were just now in the, and we might be here for a while. I got 25 pages, so we might be here for a while, but I do want to make sure that I'm actually covering the case And these are the notes and the impressions that I did just take. So the cops show up. This is November 2024, and the children did not at that point disclose sexual abuse. They did not disclose any grooming. This is all according to the prosecutor, the state. But they did say Tim had in some way touched them physically. But there wasn't, because there was no allegation specifically of touching any inappropriate areas or doing any inappropriate sexual contact. The authorities closed the case. Law enforcement said, we don't have enough. We're moving on. Nevertheless, the boys started to go to therapy. Now, the prosecutor did say several times that it is typical. It is typical in cases such as these for children not to disclose the abuse at first. The prosecutor also said there was a problem in this case because the person asking them kids the question was this scary, intimidating police officer who came to the children's house. Apparently, according to the best practices, officers are not supposed to speak with children. This is supposed to be something done by trained professionals, and this is because of the power dynamic. Kids don't want to disappoint a cop. They don't want to make a cop mad, and the cop was definitely asking leading questions, which we did hear in a recording that was played in this case, in this hearing just now. So then that's November 2024, but then, like I said, again, there was no case pursued at that time. Well, a few months go by, and now it's February 2025. In February 2025, there were 2 allegations or referrals made to the SAG, Screen Actors Guild hotline or whatever. Now, remember, I think that the wife of Tim Busfield was the president of the Screen Actors Guild at some point. So on February 17th, 2025, the hotline for the Screen Actors Guild gets a referral from someone. I don't know. I think it was maybe anonymous, but this person said that the boy who took over the role for the 2 twin boys, now they're fired. Remember that, or they didn't get hired back or whatever. A new little boy came and took their place. And this new little boy, apparently, according to this February 17th, 2025, what would you call it? Like a referral that was sent into the Screen Actors Guild, February 17th, 2025. That little boy who took over, now this wasn't a complaint coming from him. This was an anonymous complaint, but it said that Tim Busfield had kissed that actor while the actor was getting his hair cut. Tim, apparently, according to this report, was drunk and had been drinking in his trailer. Now, the very next day, and the prosecutor was very clear that this allegation did not come from the parents of these children, did not come from these children. Those children were not on the set. There's no way they could have even known this. Then again, it was like an anonymous complaint. So I don't know how they were able to vet that. The very next day, another complaint came in about Tim Busfield in this case to the Screen Actors Guild. They said, hold on. Another complaint came in. This was related to VL's audition back in September, several months prior. Remember, he didn't get the part again or whatever, but he still did audition. Somebody complained about seeing something happen to VL, which was that he was brought back into a room to do an audition alone. The prosecutor was again clear. This complaint also did not come from the parents. So that was February 17th and 18th. Excuse me. February 17th and 18th. These 2 separate allegations come through. After all these allegations, that's what finally prompts Warner Brothers to start their investigation and do their internal investigation. Warner Brothers hires a law firm. I think it was a lady by the name of something McGovern, something like that. And they do include in the defense exhibits and Timothy Busfield's exhibits, they include this investigation and the results of it. The first investigation, there was 2 of them apparently. The first investigation was completed in February, that same month that those 2 complaints came in, and it finished in March. The boys were not interviewed for this investigation, which I do find to be interesting. Why weren't the boys interviewed if at least one of the allegations was about these boys? The state said this should give you an idea of the reliability of that Warner Brothers investigation. Well, after that investigation was concluded and a report was made, Warner Brothers was calling the parents of the twin boys to say, oh, look, nothing happened. We did an investigation into ourselves and we are innocent. The parents then went to a civil attorney because they were they were unsure of how they should be coordinating or communicating, if they should be communicating, should they be signing anything, like what should they really be doing? So they went to a lawyer, but according to the prosecutor, this lawyer was a family friend of the twins' parents. Now, we did end up finding this out today. The dad was apparently also a lawyer and he had his own law firm, but then he got in trouble for fraud or something. We'll get to that when we get to it. But the boys apparently for the Warner Brothers investigation at first were not interviewed. Even though one of the allegations was that one of them had to do a private audition, which is against the rules of the Screen Actors Guild, but they did not in the first investigation interview the boys. So that all happened in September 2025. Okay, so then September 2025, they did this report, another different investigation. The parents went to a civil attorney. The attorney had concerns, sends a letter to Warner Brothers, and then that's whenever they do the second investigation. That was September. So the first one was March 2024. 5. The second one was September 2025. Let me update my notes because I put 4 here. Okay. So in that second report, there were concerns of sexual abuse. Nobody ever reported that abuse. And this is something new I learned today. In New Mexico, everybody is a mandated reporter. This is crazy. I didn't even know this was constitutional. But apparently, if you know about child abuse or anything like that, you have to go tell authorities. No matter, you don't have to, only if you're sometimes it's like if you are a doctor, like there's mandated reporters. Well, apparently, according to this prosecutor, everybody in New Mexico is a mandated reporter. Nobody reported these allegations of abuse, not Warner Brothers, not the lawyers conducting the investigation, nor the other people. But the Warner Brothers investigation, part 2, or the second one, still found no wrongdoing. Nevertheless, the boys continued on in therapy. In therapy, remember now, so the first thing we talked about was a doctor. Warner Brothers did 2 investigations, but apparently never interviewed these boys. So in therapy, with the therapist, not the doctor was from that first in November 2024. Now we're in September 2025. By some point, SL then did describe the sexual abuse. That's what the prosecutor called it. He's innocent until proven guilty, but it was sexual abuse as described by the prosecutors on the part of Tim Busfield toward these SL. He even said he was mad. Tim was mad at his dad because he thought he knew it was going. Oh, the kid. Okay. SL even said that he was mad. He was mad at his own father. Ooh, this is crazy. SL said he was mad at his dad because his dad knew it was going on. SL said he thought his dad knew it was going on because his dad had an iPad. And, there's like a thing going on about who had an iPad, who didn't. The parents had iPads. They didn't. Were they supposed to? Did they not? Was Tim the reason they didn't? At some point they did, but then once Tim came on, they didn't. All that. The little boy said, I was mad at my dad because I thought he could see it all going on the iPad. And y'all, the way they describe that dad, maybe he did. Anyway, so SL then gets diagnosed with PTSD. A therapist made a referral. So that therapist thinks that something went on and then makes a further referral to a doctor. So this would be the now third professional, medical professional type that, or mental health or medical professional that the boys were then referred to. Also during the therapy, VL, the twin brother, then eventually did disclose inappropriate touching. So then the referral that was made was to a doctor at Journey Pediatrics. Somebody at Journey Pediatrics saw the kids. This is still September 2025. This is just recently indicated sexual abuse in that visit in the treatment of the kids. So the third medical or mental health professional also indicated that they believed some abuse or some grooming had occurred. The prosecutor then stops and says, I also want to just make it clear that the doctor was the one who reported these concerns to the police department, not the mother, as Timothy in his defense claimed. The norm is that children will delay disclosure. They'll put it off. They won't disclose. They won't tell. There's many reasons for this. And she said the literature does show this. She said about 80% of all children who are abused will delay telling what happened. It is normal also for kids to disclose just a little bit at a time, to quote, test the waters. She said the kids talked about being scared. They talked about people being mean to them. They talked about the possible repercussions of making allegations. And this shows more reasons why the boys delayed disclosure. Well, so like a month goes by and now it's Halloween 2025. And at this point, the cops had opened the investigation back up. Because remember earlier, they were like, we can't really do nothing with this because the boys didn't even say that anything happened. Well, now the boys did say something happened. So then they put the boys in for another interview with another separate, now fourth professional. And this is investigators at what is being called a safe house interview. This was described by the prosecutors as a neutral third party. The boys never said the abuse happened when they were alone with Timothy Busfield. What they had said was there were always people around, and he's just kind of like making it so normalized that no one even notices, or maybe they're allowing it to go on. But you know what? To me, it kind of makes it even more stronger of a thing of like, okay, well, if all these people saw and none of them said anything, don't all these people have incentives to act like, oh, no, I didn't see nothing? Because like what kind of monster would they be if they saw it and they didn't say anything? Somebody said, I bet the parents knew and didn't push it because they wanted the money, then pushed it once they weren't rehired. I kind of got that impression too. I don't want to make any allegations against any parents. This is probably one of the hardest things to go through. But the fact that the little boy SL said his dad knew it was going on, I think is interesting to say the least. Anyway, back to my notes. The boys never said they were completely alone when they were abused or touched inappropriately. So these arguments and statements about never being alone with him are irrelevant. What the boys did disclose, according to the prosecutor, is how it made them feel and how uncomfortable they were. She says that actually SL's timeline of abuse is corroborated and lines up with the set teacher's allegations that he didn't want to act anymore. His behavior, bedwetting, nightmares, PTSD also corroborates his timeline of events. They highlighted what Timothy Busfield himself told police, and they say he admitted it. He admitted it. He would tickle people. He tickled these boys. He would pick them up. Then he backtracked and said, oh, I don't remember ever picking them up or whatever. But he contradicts himself. But he does say it is highly likely he did touch these boys in some way. The victim's father, did he encourage this behavior? Maybe. But Busfield himself also never said, no, I don't hug people's kids. He sure did hug them when they came up to hug him. He should have said, no, I don't do hugs. That's kind of what the prosecutor said. I mean, when, reasonable minds can disagree. The prosecutor then goes to lay out the witnesses that they relied on, including Lauren and Taylor Trujillo and Lee Lewin, who were production assistants and the set teacher. They confirmed the boys were not always supervised and that people lose track of the kids on set because it's a little hectic. There's a lot going on the sets. Two of the other affidavit or interviews that the cops did, they ended up reneging their statements. And one was Danielle Hill, and one was Christina Carr. They're now unhappy with how it was portrayed. But the prosecutor said, yeah, this is exactly showing you, Your Honor, what happens to people when they do try to speak out. They have gotten to. She said there's concern that people have gotten to these witnesses, and now they're writing statements on behalf of Timothy Busfield. She goes to the next exhibit, and she says sexual abuse on children is violent in and of itself. The judge did end up agreeing with that. She also says there's a history of this behavior. There was a 17-year-old girl who said that something had happened to her. There was the father of a 16-year-old. The 17-year-old sued him, remember? There was the father of the 16-year-old who recently came forward. And then, of course, there was that 28-year-old woman. Now, Timothy Busfield's lawyers were referring to the 16 and the 17-year-old as as post-pubescent women. Ew, those were kids. Like, what the hell? But anyway, I didn't like that. So there was other affidavits. Rachel Wright, who felt that Timothy Busfield was manipulating her. Exhibits 4 through 6 were supposed to show the dangerousness of Timothy Busfield. Exhibit 4 was a girl who was 16 years old at the time, working at the B Street Theater. Tim and this is another interesting piece of information that I just learned today. Whenever that 16-year-old girl and her parents were approached about that whole B Street Theater thing and told that that Tim Busfield will go to therapy if they don't call the cops or whatever, it wasn't just Timothy Busfield who approached. It was Timothy Busfield and his brother, according to the prosecutor. So it was like the brother and Tim Busfield were like, "Oh, don't report, him, he'll go to therapy," or whatever. So his brother is the other founder of this supposed B Street Theater thing. So that's interesting to me. But anyway, what her allegations were in this affidavit in Exhibit 4. What was her name again? Oh, they didn't say her name. Maybe Rachel White. I don't know what her name was. I don't know what her name was. I don't know if they said it. Exhibit 5 was someone who was a personal assistant for Timothy Busfield. And she had worked for them from May 2017 through 2019. She describes Tim Busfield as being inappropriate, intimidating. He was using his position of authority and the power dynamic to take advantage of her. But I don't know if that she made any allegations of SUL. I'm just kind of going through like what the prosecutor said. I don't have these documents. I just have what the prosecutor said. The comments were apparently made to this personal assistant that if she kept acting a certain way, that she might make Tim Busfield have a crush on her. And this girl, this person was a personal assistant of not only Tim Busfield, but also the wife. So again, I mean, I've seen people speculate like the wife knew just as much as anybody what was going on. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was a personal assistant of both of theirs, according to the prosecutor. Then they go on to Exhibit 6, which was another affidavit from somebody by the name of Claudia Christian, who is an actress. She reported that she acted on The Strays. I don't know if that's a movie, a show. She was already cast in the role as an actress at the time. And during the show, she and Tim Busfield were, quote, running lines. They're going back and forth, practicing their lines. And they went to his trailer. Once they were there, according to the affidavit in Exhibit 6 for the detention hearing, once they were in the trailer, she was completely alone with him. And almost immediately, he forcibly grabbed her, according to this affidavit, threw her against a wall, was sexually aroused, and then she ran and escaped and went and told an assistant director. She said, keep me away from Tim Busfield or whatever. So again, this is a Claudia Christian, an actress from The Strays. The prosecutor tried to argue today, and it was not successful, that there were no conditions of release. These are the so-called F6 factors. There's no conditions of release that will allow for this to be, to diminish his dangerousness to the public. There's a history, there's medical findings, there's professionals, there's therapists. The boy's allegations are, not exaggerated. The behavior hasn't stopped, even though he's been named in lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then the prosecutor moved on to talking about something that Tim Busfield relied heavily on, which was the credibility or the lack of credibility of the boy's parents. The prosecutor said, okay, the parents have a criminal history, and the defendant says that they have some type of motive to lie because they have been convicted of crimes in the past and they have other lawsuits. The prosecutor said the prosecutor said the parents in this case are not the victims. The parents in this case are not the ones making allegations. The kids didn't even disclose this to their parents. They disclosed to neutral third parties, a therapist, a doctor. There's no money attached. The defendant, Timothy Busfield, is trying to say this is all for money. There's no money involved in a criminal. How are they going to get money from a criminal complaint? For a victim to go through all of this is not an easy process for an adult, much less kids. The defendant is making allegations about kids getting paid. So doesn't it make more sense for them to just go and get another actor job instead of worrying about getting paid? What makes more sense is that once they got away from Tim, the prosecutor said that once he got out of his clutches, that's when they started making their allegations. That's when the judge interrupted and asked a question. The judge says, okay, but are the parents going to file a civil lawsuit? Have they filed a civil lawsuit? Because that, maybe they would be trying to get money in there. The prosecutor said from what she understands, no, there's definitely there's no civil lawsuit has been filed yet, but there's no plans to file one apparently. And she continues. She said there's corroborating evidence, there's affidavits, and she's like, again, everybody's out here with their 875011 letters saying this couldn't have happened because there were so many people around. But the kids didn't say nobody was around. She pointed to, what's that guy's name? The gymnastics guy. Was it Nasser? He abused kids right in front of their parents, and he disguised it as medical treatment. So the parents were kind of like not even sure like what they were even looking at. She said there's no condition or set of conditions that would help this. She did then address a polygraph test. She said, we don't even have the raw data from that, so don't put too much weight into that. And she addressed the attacks on the witness characteristics. She said attacks on witnesses don't eliminate the risk that Tim poses to the community. That studio's investigation had nothing to do with a criminal investigation. That investigation was minimal at best because they didn't even interview those boys. Okay, so then the defense got to stand up and do their turn. And they kind of had three separate parts of their thing that went on. So the guy stood up first. He said, first, we're going to do an intro. Then we're going to have one witness. Then I'm going to let this other lady stand up, my co-counsel, and she's going to do the arguments. So they admit several exhibits, Exhibit A through Exhibit B. The prosecutor, so the defense, this is Tim Busfield's lawyer. He's like, the prosecutor referred to our evidence as speculative, but this is not speculative. What the court has before it is probably the most comprehensive report to a motion for pretrial detention that has ever been filed in the history of the state of New Mexico. This guy just opened up on a big statement. Okay, this is a Mark Agnifilo in training type, I see. He said, and we did it in 7 days. It's given, and you did it at my birthday. Timothy Busfield's lawyers are definitely earning their paycheck. The lawyer said every aspect of the state's case is flawed. Every aspect of the state's case is questionable. He said, I'd like to remind everybody that my client is supposed to be presumed innocent. Sitting right here before you is an innocent man until he's proven guilty. And I have significant concerns about the prosecution talking as if he has already been convicted. Whoa, he's pulling one out of Alan Jackson's book. He said to the witnesses that say they don't believe, to the witnesses, she said these people don't believe witnesses when they come forward. The question before the court is nothing about believing a witness. It's about, is Tim in custody pending trial or is he getting let out? There hasn't even been an indictment, Timothy Busfield's lawyer said. There's no target notice. The judge interrupted again. Whoa. Is there something scheduled? We have a grand jury scheduled, don't we? The prosecutor said, yes, we do. But to follow your honor's order, I don't want to say it publicly. The judge said, okay. So there is a grand jury that is, scheduled, but the prosecutor in the case today didn't want to let it be known publicly when that's going to be. The defense said the arguments of the prosecution is based on a massive fallacy. Heads, we win. Tails, you lose. He's damned if he does, damned if he don't. If he doesn't bring any evidence of his innocence or his not guilty, then he's, must be guilty. But if he brings all this evidence forward, then he also must be guilty. They have a few printouts. They have a criminal complaint and several police reports, but they were all authored by the same person, Busfield's lawyer says. We have significant concerns about this Detective Brown and what he includes in his report and what he leaves out from his report. The state said only the relevant parts go into a criminal complaint. He said, but we're going to be playing a recording later about when the kids were first interviewed and talked to in this case. It's not even true to say they didn't disclose. They actually flat out denied any abuse. Their case, the prosecutor's case, is completely slanted, the defense said, to omit exculpatory evidence. Woo! That would be a Brady violation. Y'all better watch your step. He said, one last thing I want to address in this opening, Your Honor, is the self-surrender process. It wasn't 5 days that my client waited to turn himself in. It was only 3.5. Okay, I don't think that helps too much. He said, at Friday evening, the warrant came and we went in and turned him in on Tuesday morning. All actions that he took were at my direction to mount a defense, which is his right. This lawyer said, I tried to talk to the prosecutors to negotiate a self-surrender. They didn't want to work with me. He drove 2,000 miles in 2 days. He spent one afternoon on a psychosexual risk assessment and one morning doing a polygraph test, and then we self-surrendered. He is ready to fight this case. He is going to fight this case, and with respect for the law. An arrest warrant is not an order to the defendant, Your Honor. That was a strong one. He said, Tim Busfield's lawyer said, an arrest warrant is not an order to the defendant. It's an order to the police. My client wanted to confront these allegations. So then they call up their first witness. And this is a man by the name of Alan Caudillo, Caudillo. He was sworn in. He sat down. Who is this guy? He's a director of photography on movies and TV shows. He supervises photographers and photography departments for projects. He hires the crew. He guides guest directors through the process of a show. He works closely with directors of the shows that he's working on and the movies he's working on. He's been in the film industry for over 25 years. He's worked on hundreds of projects and he's done thousands of days of filming. He's a union member of the International Cinematographers Guild Local 600 and a union member of the Directors Guild of America. He worked on The Hangover and The Hangover 2, and he also worked on this show, The Cleaning Lady. And his job on that show was lead director of photography for seasons 1 through 4. So he was on every single episode of the show. Canceled. The show was canceled after season 4, and he did admit and agree that he did interact with Timothy Busfield. Tim became a guest director in season 2, episode 11. He worked on the show from seasons 3 through 4. He did a good job. He was well liked by cast and crew. He was a producer and a director for the last 2 seasons, meaning like he came in originally as a guest director, but eventually he got moved to being a producer, which is even a higher up job. That means that he helped make sure that each guest director came in, understood the process. He worked with the cast, the crew. He supervised the editing. He supervised music. And this would have been what Tim was doing at the time. He also did some casting to some extent. But there had to be a guide for the guest directors, and Tim acted as the guide. Now, the lawyer, when asking questions of this witness, did reiterate, Mr. Busfield, this is another kind of like new piece of information I feel like I just got today, but Timothy Busfield apparently only worked on 5 episodes of the show total. Like I was under the impression he was like directing every episode, 5 total episodes. Then the lawyer said, okay, well, did you review the complaint in this case? The director of photography, Alan, said yes. Are you aware of the allegations? He said yes, but from the complaint. Okay, so what's your understanding of the nature of the allegations? He said, what? I don't understand the question. And then he asks again, okay, so what did the complaint say happened? What's the nature of these allegations? The director of photography, the witness that they had called up, said that Timothy, he's like, I guess SL said Timothy touched him inappropriately on set. The lawyer said, was it during filming? That he alleged he did that during filming. The witness said, yeah, he said it happened like when on the complaint, it appeared that it was on set while filming when Tim would say cut, and then that's what he would do. Did you work on every episode that Tim directed? This guy said, yeah. And you worked closely with him on each of these episodes? The guy said, absolutely. I work closely with all the directors. One of my jobs is was to help Tim on his first episode that he ever did. I never left his side during that first episode. The lawyer said, is it possible that he ever inappropriately touched SL on the set? This witness said, no, it is not possible he ever inappropriately touched SL. Everything on set is incredibly regimented. It might look chaotic, but it ain't that chaotic. We are a group of professionals and we all know what we need to do. We do what we got to do without being told. At any given time, if a child was on set, there would be a minimum of 10 other people right in the room with them at the same time. That would be for every take, for every shot. And especially with children, we had such minimal time with them. Often we wouldn't even rehearse with these kids. Okay, the lawyer says, let's switch to the next question. What about these parents? Do you know these parents? Yes. How much did you interact with them? He said, well, I always like to take care to get to know the parents of the kids so they feel comfortable and know that we're taking care of their children. I would also see them at wrap parties, like, when they wrap up the production to celebrate. He said the mother was quiet and reserved, but the dad was a very alpha male kind of guy. Well, that's a pedophile's worst nightmare, is an alpha male type of guy. He was a typical aggressive set parent. And the lawyer said, did this father ever do anything odd? The director of the photography director said, yes, he did. He was overly aggressive to try to win my favor and be my friend. He would force the kids to give me a high five or a hug. He would say, go give Mr. Allen a hug. And that made me uncomfortable, this witness said. The lawyer said, did it seem like the father was trying to force relationships? Again, this kind of comes back to that theory that we were kind of talking about earlier. Like maybe something did happen, but the father knew. I don't know if that's, just a theory somebody had. Did it seem like the father was trying to force relationships with the kids and the adults on this, between his kids and adults on the set? This guy said, yeah, kind of, but I don't think he really understood what I did. Like, I didn't really have that much power. I'm not a decision maker. I don't cast people in shows and stuff. I think the dad thought I was important and he's a clout chaser and he was trying to get the kids to be, in my good graces or whatever, but I ain't nobody, basically, is what this guy kind of implied. The lawyer did move then on to the next question. He said, how did it come to be that the kids ended up leaving the show? The witness said, well, there were several things that happened. Number one, because of COVID, our schedule was extended, and this was a role for one character, and the two twin boys were playing this character. But we shot the pilot in 2021, and the kids were on the pilot, but they were growing up. They were looking different. The whole series is supposed to take place in like 1 year in the story. There were also actors' strikes, writers' strikes, and the kids just kept growing through all this. They were different heights than when they had started. They had different facial structures. And it became clear that we needed to make a change. He said, well, I didn't make the change. It wasn't really my decision. It was a studio decision. The question then was asked by the lawyer, how did the parents take it whenever the kids were, replaced? He said, well, I really don't know. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it. I heard they were upset and took it badly. Now, if I was the prosecutor, I would have said, objection, Your Honor, hearsay. If they want to talk about what somebody heard, they need to bring that witness up. But the prosecutor did not object. Then the lawyer said, all right, I want to do one more line of questioning. How much pay did the kids get for each episode? The guy said, I don't know, but I heard, again, objection, hearsay. I heard it was 50 or 60,000 an episode for the two kids. So both kids, but it was 50, 60 an episode. And he said, but truly, I really don't know. And that's what I heard, but it really doesn't seem out of bounds. How many episodes were there in season 1? He said 10. So 10 times 50 or 60, 10, we'll just go 50. That's $500,000. And then 12 each. So like $500,000 a season. 1, 2, 1.5, and then the 2. And then if it was up to 60, then maybe it was more than that. Millions, over $1 million for sure. How much had to be set aside for these kids? He said that has to be 15% has to be set aside for the kids. It's called a Coogan account, and it's to make sure that the child actors' assets are protected. Parents can keep up to 85% of what the kids earn. There's no rule against it. So then the prosecutor comes up to do the cross-examination, and she's got some questions of her own. She said, you wrote an affidavit, didn't you? Yes. When was that? He said, I'm not really great with dates. A few days ago, I guess a week ago, maybe January 13th, something like that. Okay. Did you ever see this man, Timothy Busfield, tickle or pick up the little boys? The man said, no, I never saw him do that. But from reading the complaint, you just admitted you read the complaint, right? So from reading the complaint, he did do that. He said, well, yes, but I never saw it. Okay, but you just said the dad was concerning? Well, yeah, he felt weird. He was kind of creepy, to be honest. And the prosecutor's like, okay. So you didn't like that the dad had his boys hug you? He said, yeah, no, I didn't like that. But he had the boys hug everybody. He said, but I wouldn't do that to my kids. I wouldn't make them hug people. And I thought that was weird. I do think that's weird, by the way. I wouldn't make my kids hug people either. I don't have kids, but if I did, I can't imagine that I would force them to hug people. And she said, so you thought it was weird? He said, yeah. And she goes, but you still hugged them. You did hug them though, did you not? He said, oh, rarely. I was uncomfortable with it. Okay. Did you ever tell the dad you were uncomfortable with it? Did you ever say you had concerns about it? He said, well, no, but I'm not their dad. That's their parent. She said, yeah, but for you said you were uncomfortable. So why didn't you tell the dad that you didn't want them hugging you? He's like, oh, no. I didn't say that I was uncomfortable hugging them. I just thought it was concerning that he had them hugging strangers. He said, for me, that was a concern. So he's telling on himself. He said that he thought it was uncomfortable to be hugged. And then it's uncomfortable to be hugging strangers. And then he's like, but he was one of the strangers. So y'all can do with that what you want. Okay. You were uncomfortable. Did you ever express that discomfort to anybody ever on set? Do you ever have any conversations about this weird dad with anybody on set? He said, no. And when did you read the criminal complaint? He said, when it came out. Okay. Who contacted you to write your affidavit? He froze. He looked over at the lawyer. He looked over at the gallery. He looked at the lawyer. He froze like a deer in headlights. Finally, he said, Melissa, I think it was Melissa, Tim's wife. No, wait. Yeah. Melissa, Tim's wife. And then I sent it to the law firm. No, wait. Then I sent it to Melissa. So I don't know. There's something going on there with that. And then Melissa forwarded it to them. Okay, so you were aware that he had admitted, you said you read the complaint when it came out. So you were aware he admitted to tickling these boys? He said, well, it was in the complaint. So, I mean, I guess. She said, no further questions. Oh, whoop. So then they send that witness away, and there's more discussion and stuff. The lady lawyer on the defense side, on Tim Busfield's side, doesn't then come up. She said, let's start with this presumption. In our society, liberty is the norm, and detention before trial is an exception. There was a finding of probable cause, she said, but that judge wasn't in possession of all the correct evidence. Is there even really probable cause in this case, Your Honor? The proof is not reliable, as is required. The burden is clear and convincing evidence that instantly tilts the scale. The state is nowhere near instant tilt of the scale. The state only bases its motion on 2 out of the 5 necessary factors. The prosecutor addressed the defense's concern that the state of New Mexico has acknowledged that when someone is detained for a crime against children, that's exactly what the law contemplates. She said they are talking about our evidence being highly irrelevant, but it's actually extremely relevant. She said the state's witnesses, the prosecutor's witnesses, are not credible. The judge has to base his decision on the reliable proof. Our evidence shows the complaint itself by the prosecutors is not credible. It's impossible to be true. They have so many omissions. There's so many independent witnesses coming forward to say that they were misrepresented in the state's filings. The allegations themselves are not credible. The boys, this is according to Timothy Busfield's lawyer. Okay, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just reading all my notes. The boys did say this happened when they were alone, but then they changed their story. This case has had evolving allegations. Warner Brothers did a second investigation that the state conveniently forgets to mention. They didn't include or reference this complaint. There's a quote from Defense Exhibit I that the allegation was that Tim Busfield had isolated the twins out of sight and sound. But the fact that these allegations have evolved, the defense said, only makes it all the less credible. She said, let's go to the criminal complaint. I'm going to play Defense Exhibit Z. She played an audio clip of the first interview that the police, that cops had with the boys. This was from the November 2024. Prosecutor said it was not good practice to be asking questions before the safe house interview. And the defense said, we agree. This was the first time they ever spoke, starting with VL. And it's a cop that says, and you know what's right and wrong, don't you? Does Tim ever touch you in this way or that way? The kid said, no, he never touched me. Never touched you? No. Never touched you in private areas? Never. 5 minutes later, SL is then interviewed. This is defense exhibit AA. The boys were separated. The cop asked SL out of the presence. So they were not in the room together. They were interviewed separately. Asks the exact same question about private areas. And the second boy, SL, did say no. He doesn't touch that. The defense said that is not a failure to disclose. That is an express denial. She addressed the medical records. She said the defense didn't submit these as exhibits, but I do want to read a couple pieces from it because the state made assertion that SL reported this to his parents unprompted, and the defense said that's not true. The prosecutors said they didn't report to their parents. That's just not accurate. The complaint itself is not credible, the defense said. There's therapist notes. I'm going to read from it, quote, "Father told client that client needed to be honest so the family could heal. It was only after the father said that the child disclosed the so-called, quote, abuse. This is not a spontaneous disclosure. This is in the presence of and looking at the dad." That is corroborated with other medical records. The allegation that SL was having nightmares and suffering abuse is false. That's what the defense said. He wasn't having nightmares, and he never said he was. It was the father who said he was having nightmares. When the father left the room, the son told the therapist that he's waking up at night because he's just too hot or too cold. The father said the kid was having nightmares. SL never remembered having nightmares, according to the defense. And she's reading from these medical records, which we don't have access to. He says multiple times he was just waking up because he was hot. The therapist asked, why don't you just tell your dad you're hot instead of, whatever other reasons? And SL said he felt the need to please his father. He was scared to tell him what was going on because of fears of disappointing him. The complaint omits or leaves out all of that history, according to the defense. It also misconstrues conversations with their own witnesses. She moves on to defense exhibit S, which was a voicemail left to the Busfield family attorney from Danielle V. Hill, reaching out due to being referenced in the police report. She wasn't happy with what the detectives said. She said that her words were twisted by the state, and that wasn't what she had exactly said. And she wanted to speak with someone about it because it had gotten out of hand. She wasn't the only one. There was also defense exhibit L, Kristen Carr, who said the same thing, according to the defense. She said things that she thought were crucial were omitted. She wanted to renege her allegation about set teachers leaving the boys unsupervised, and she said there were always 20 or 30 people in every room. The defense then said, let's get to the crux of it, these lying-ass parents. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. She said the issue is not that people with criminal history cannot be victims of crimes. That's not what this is, Your Honor. The defense said these people are actual con artists. Oh, she said that. They have a documented history. Ronald, I don't know his last name. I misspelled it and it's not right here. But the dad, there was a Department of Justice complaint in a press release. After he was convicted of wire fraud in a mortgage crisis with a sham law firm, she went in. He got convicted and sentenced to 3 years of prison. He was disbarred. His attorney license was taken from him. People often take advantage of a crisis for personal gain. And the Department of Justice, or the judge in the case, said that this law firm that this dad used to have was the worst type of scammer. She moves on to defense exhibit E and F. These were civil lawsuits that were filed against the father on the basis of fraud. He had a Bentley. He sold it for $90,000. He didn't turn over the title. Then it got repossessed. He traded it in for a Porsche, but put the Porsche in the mama's name. This is fraudulent, the defense lawyer said. In addition, there was a $75,000 judgment for bad checks made at the MGM in Las Vegas. She said, if the boys said this never happened, why are we here? It's because they lost their role, the defense attorney said. Exhibit after exhibit talks about this. She talks about the investigation. She talks about the boys calling him Uncle Tim. She mentions some more affidavits from Joe Iato, Copper Perry, the parents of the child who replaced them. The actor said he's never alone with Tim Busfield. The parents of the child who replaced these actors wrote in support of Tim. Another one named Deborah Toner never observed a minor unaccompanied on the set. She mentions the polygraph. She mentions all these affidavits. Matthew Moore did an affidavit. That was another parent pushing forward on their kid's career. And she argues to release him on his own recognizance. If the judge had any hesitation, get a no contact order with the kids. He has no community in Albuquerque. Let him be on house arrest here. Restore his liberty. So the judge did him one better. The judge didn't even put him on house arrest in Albuquerque and did on his own recognizance release Tim. Now, I don't know if he's like immediately released or if it's going to be tomorrow. The judge said he's going to enter the order in tomorrow. So it may be tomorrow that Tim actually gets to walk out. And there definitely is more to this case than meets the eye, I will say. Something that does stand out to me and that is striking to me that Tim Busfield's lawyer said at the end of her statements, she said, this case does have victims. There are victims in this case, and it is very sad to see what has happened. The victims are those two twin boys, but they're not victims of Timothy Busfield, my client. No, they are not. She said they are victims of their own con artist, scammer parents who were upset that the money train was stopping, and they turned their own kids into, manufactured them into victims. So TLDR, Timothy Busfield is going to be able to get out on, I don't even think it's on bail. I don't even think he has to pay anything. If you have found this information to be helpful, please do consider making a donation to the channel, super chat or super thanks. I am about to go. That's all I really had for this one. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation, neither are opinions, and everyone should be and is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law after a fair trial. Love you, mean it. Okay, bye.